Chapter 7:15. Tang Zhang and Wu strode in. Since they didn't go wrong, they couldn't just enter and not enter. Wu looked around curiously. She had to admit that Princess Anne's taste was indeed extraordinary. Even someone like her, who didn't know anything about decorations, could see the extraordinary charm. Tang Zhang couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "If I were to come back in a while, I'm afraid this place would have become a real palace." Wu said with a gloomy face, "This kind of woman is really powerful." "What's so great about that?" "This is the education she received since she was young, just like how you know martial arts." Tang Zhang said disapprovingly. "Really?" "Of course." Dong dong dong. While they were talking, the crisp sound of high heels hitting the ground rang out, followed by a beautiful voice. "Ah, Tang Jing, you're back." As soon as she finished speaking, a figure flew over like a gust of wind. If not for Tang Jing moving to the side, she would have directly pounced on Tang Jing. If this person wasn't Princess Anne, who else could it be? Princess Anne was still perfect and flawless, causing people's hearts to palpitate. She stared at Tang Jing with a pair of big black eyes, looking at him in pleasant surprise. During this period of time, not only did her life as a commoner not consume her noble temperament, it made her seem even more outstanding, like the most noble and holy white swan in the world. "You're finally back. I thought you would never come back after leaving without saying goodbye," Princess Anne said happily. Tang Jing pointed to the house with a straight face and asked, "What did you do to me? Is it beautiful?" Princess Annie showed off excitedly, just like a child showing off the fruits of her labor to an adult. "These are all carefully designed by me. Every piece of decoration was personally selected by me. They were flown in from Sweden. I guarantee that they are absolutely authentic." Tang Jing rolled his eyes and said, "Is there a need for that?" "Of course it is necessary. Home is the most important place for us to live in. If we aren't satisfied with it, then we won't have the energy to work and study all day, so this is necessary." Princess Anne nodded and said solemnly. Tang Zhang was speechless. According to his understanding, a home was a place to put one's soul. A simple house was enough. There was no need to be so luxurious. There was indeed a world of difference between a princess and a commoner. "You came back at the right time. I've been in Huaxia for so long, but I've never had the chance to take a good look around the capital. Every day, I have to juggle between school and home. I'm getting tired of it," Princess Anne grumbled. "No time." Tang Jing refused without hesitation. Princess Anne was not angry. She rolled her eyes and slyly said, "If you promise me, then I will tell you something very important." "What is it?" "Promise me and I'll tell you. If you don't want to say it, then forget it." Tang Zhang was not going to fall for it. Okay, I'll tell you." Princess Anne compromised. "Yi Ding Dang is sick." "What?" Tang Zhang was shocked. "I knew you would be interested." Princess Anne proudly said, "Ever since you silently disappeared, she has been sick." Tang Zhang did not say anything and rushed out the door. "Stop! Where are you going?" Princess Anne shouted. "I'm going to look for Ding Dang." To tell the truth, when he heard that Yi Ding Dang was seriously ill, Tang Zhang's heart felt as if it had been hollowed out. Worry surged in, accompanied by a strong sense of self-blame. "Come back, you don't have to go. She has already recovered," Princess Anne quickly said. "Recovered? Of course, you disappeared for so long. If she was sick for so long, then wouldn't it be very serious? Then what kind of illness does she have?" Princess Anne shook her head. "I don't know, but I heard from their roommates that it should be related to you." "Related to me?" Tang Zhang felt a pain in his heart as he remembered the last time they parted. Yi Dingdong's determination to leave the table in the middle of the night, as well as the intense pain in her eyes. Even a blind person could see it clearly. It would be strange if she wasn't angry and sad that he had disappeared for no reason. Therefore, her illness was most likely caused by him. Thinking to this point, Tang Zheng could not stand still any longer and said to Marshall, "Go to my room to rest, I'll leave for a while." Although Marshall knew what Tang Zheng was going to do, she did not stop him. She had thousands of voices in her heart that wanted to stop Tang Zheng, but in the end, she did not say anything. "Hey, don't go. I've already told you. You have to accompany me to the capital." Princess Anne did not have any worries and straightforwardly called out. Tang Zheng did not even turn his head as he turned a deaf ear and disappeared through the door, leaving behind the two women looking at each other in dismay. Princess Anne fiercely stomped her feet and said, "If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have told him this news. I ran away so quickly like a rabbit." With that, he turned his gaze and fixed it on Marshall. The corner of his mouth slightly raised as he asked with interest, "You are Marshall, right?" Marshall proudly raised his head and did not answer. He directly walked towards Tang Zheng's room. "Wow, you have a personality." Princess Anne's eyes lit up. She had never been a person who followed the rules and regulations. She was a typical rebel amongst the princesses of the royal family. Seeing martial arts being so cold, she did not feel offended. Instead, she was interested. "It's almost time for dinner. It must be over. I'll treat you to a meal." Princess Anne took the initiative to express her goodwill. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be overjoyed. They would feel that it was their greatest honor. But Marshall did not take this lying down. He turned around and left. With a bang, he closed the door, leaving Princess Anne to stare. She smacked her lips. She did not feel offended. Instead, she praised from the bottom of her heart, "Such a girl with a personality is really too interesting. It seems that we will be living under the same roof in the future. That's great." "Oh, no, doesn't this mean that Tang Zheng is going to live with Marshall?" Her face instantly darkened, and the light in her eyes also disappeared in an instant. Tang Zheng anxiously rushed to school but was told that Yi Dingdang had gone home. Thus, under the complaints of Yi Dingdang's 3 roommates, he hurriedly rushed towards the Ye family. The Ye family's courtyard house was serene and quiet. However, it was completely different from the courtyard house that Tang Zheng previously went to. He did not rush into the Ye family's entrance because he was stopped at the entrance. He was already considered a frequent guest of the Ye family. How could the guards at the entrance not recognize him? However, he was still stopped. Tang Zheng suspiciously raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's going on with you guys?" "Sorry, the Ye family does not welcome you." The guard stiffly said. "Does not welcome me? Did you recognize the wrong person?" Tang Zheng asked in confusion. "Of course we recognize you. We would still recognize you even if you turned into ashes." The guard unhappily said, "Aren't you Tang Zheng? The one we are stopping is you. The Ye family does not welcome you." This. Tang Zheng was speechless. Just what happened? How could there be such a big change in the blink of an eye? No, he had to see Yi Dingdang. Otherwise, he would not be able to sleep and eat in peace. "If you want to stop me, then don't blame me for being impolite." Tang Zheng was ready to force his way in. With a push of his hands, the guard was no match for him. With a bang, he slammed into the door and could no longer block his way. Tang Zheng rushed into the Ye family. In an instant, many people gathered from all directions and shouted angrily, "Stop! Do you think the Ye family is a place where you can come and go as you please? Stop right there!" The crowd attacked and Tang Zheng immediately fell into a sea of people. Seeing that he could not move forward, Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety and anger. "Since that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite." Bang bang bang, his figure flashed and palm shadows flew. The people in front of him were sent flying one by one. After a while, there was no one who could stand up. Tang Zheng was about to move forward when suddenly, an angry roar exploded. "Stop!" Yi Tianlei walked out with an ashen face and scolded, "Tang Zheng, this is the Ya family. What are you doing? Are you deliberately offending the Ya family?" Yi Tianlei had never used such a harsh tone to treat Tang Zheng. Even when Tang Zheng did not like him, he did not do so. Looking at Yi Tianlei, Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He braced himself and said, "Uncle Yi, how would I dare to offend the Ya family? It's just that when I wanted to come in, they just had to stop me. The Ya family does not welcome you. Didn't they make it clear to you? Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're strong in modification?" Yi Tianlei asked loudly. "Of course not." Tang Zheng flatly denied, "I just can't wait to see Ding Dang." "You still dare to mention Ding Dang? You still have the face to mention Ding Dang?" Yi Tianlei was so angry that he could not restrain his anger as he asked. Tang Zheng was stunned. Yi Tianlei's reaction was too big. It was as if he was a different person. But he did not back down. He braced himself and said, "Uncle Yi, don't be angry. I know that I made Ding Dang angry. I'm here to apologize to her." "Apologize? Where did you go before? You disappeared for no reason and now you're here to apologize. What do you think my daughter is, Yi Tianlei? You want her to come and go as you please. You want to settle this with a simple apology?" Yi Tianlei angrily asked. "Of course not. I definitely don't have such thoughts. I had some urgent matters to attend to before. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to see Ding Dang only today," Tang Zheng patiently explained. But Yi Tianlei did not have the patience. He didn't even want to say another word to him. He waved his hand in disgust and said, "There's no point in saying more. The Ya family does not welcome you and Ding Dang doesn't want to see you either. Also, I'm telling you, from now on, don't disturb my daughter. Uncle Yi, there's some misunderstanding between Ding Dang and I. It'll be fine after we clear things up," Tang Zheng explained. "Misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding. Tang Zheng, I misjudged you. You're really an expert at playing with a girl's feelings. I've seen plenty of people like you. If you don't leave, then I'll beat you up every time I see you," Yi Tianlei threatened as he clenched his fists. Chapter 7:16. Yi Tianlei angrily glared at Tang Zheng and said, "Do you really think I don't dare to hit you?" Tang Zheng raised his neck high, his gaze firm, clearly expressing his attitude. "Fine, since that's the case, then I'll fulfill your wish." Seeing this, Yi Tianlei flew into a rage. "Gotcha," his fist clenched tightly. So, like lightning, his large fist struck Tang Zheng's chest. He only used 50% of his strength. He thought that Tang Zheng would dodge, but he did not dodge at all, directly taking this punch. Pang! With a muffled sound, Tang Zheng was like a sandbag, flying backwards and fiercely crashing into a tree trunk. Gotcha! The tree trunk snapped in half. Pooh! Tang Zheng spat out a mouthful of blood. Although this punch was not enough to heavily injure him, he did not use his martial arts to block it. All of the power was completely absorbed by his body, so there was no need to doubt the shock to his internal organs. Why didn't you dodge?" Yi Tianlei asked. Tang Zheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "I already said that I would let you hit me. Why would I dodge?" Yi Tianlei was speechless, his expression changing slightly. Even though he looked angry on the surface, his heart did not feel good at all. He had always thought highly of Tang Zheng, as this kind of young elite was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He and Ding Dang were originally a match made in heaven, but who would have thought that in the end, he would hurt his daughter's heart and even cause her to fall ill? If it was any other parent, they would be angry. Inside the room, two pairs of eyes stared at Tang Jing through the gap in the window. When she saw Tang Jing injured and spitting out blood, Yi Dingdong's expression changed, her snow-white teeth biting her lips. Feng Xinyang saw her daughter's appearance from the side and faintly sighed, saying, "Little handsome brother is actually quite good. Just punish him a bit. If this continues, there will be no way to end it." Yi Dingdang resolutely said, "I have nothing to do with him anymore. What's the point? You two are really a good match. If you withdraw, wouldn't other women be taking advantage of you?" Feng Xinyang persuaded earnestly. "Humph, wouldn't that fulfill his wish? Doesn't he like those women?" Yi Dingdang said in a bad mood. "Dingdang, I won't interfere with your decision, but don't blame me if you regret it in the future." Yi Dingdang turned to look at her mother and said, "You've been with Dad for so many years. Has he ever looked for other women?" Feng Xinyang raised an eyebrow. "If he dares, it would be strange if I didn't cripple him." Yi Dingdang smiled bitterly. "If Dad can do it, why can't he?" "This," Feng Xinyang hesitantly said, "everyone is different. Your father isn't as capable as him. Just because he's capable, he can flirt with other women." Feng Xinyang wanted to say yes. In today's society, how many successful people are loyal to one person? But looking at her daughter's expression, she took back these cruel words. Yi Dingdang coldly snorted and said, "Before, I chose to turn a blind eye. But I didn't expect that not only did he not restrain himself, he became more and more unbridled. I'm afraid he can't even count how many women he has by his side. Alright, since you've made your decision, I won't persuade you. But we can't always let him cause trouble outside. Humph, I want to see how long he can cause trouble." Yi Dingdang turned around and sat on the sofa, picked up a book and started reading. Feng Xinyang helplessly shook her head. She said in her heart, "What's the point of torturing these two people?" She glanced out the window and secretly said, "Little handsome brother, why are you so muddle-headed?" At this moment, Tang Zheng wasn't muddle-headed at all. His mind was very clear. He finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Yi Dingdang was serious this time. People were most afraid of being serious. Once they were serious, things would develop in an unpredictable direction. Tang Zheng didn't want to see such a result. He decided not to leave. He had to see Dingdang and explain things to her face to face. "You really don't want to leave?" Yi Tianlei was at his wit's end and asked again. "Yes." "Alright, then you wait. I'll see how long you wait." Yi Tianlei angrily flicked his sleeves and left. He really couldn't do anything about Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng looked towards a small room in front of him. He could confirm that there were two people looking at him in that room. One of them had a very familiar aura. It must be Yi Dingdang. However, he did not rush in immediately. He knew that Yi Dingdang was still angry, so he would wait for her to calm down. He could afford to wait. As night fell, in the courtyard of the Ya family, a person stood upright like a piece of wood. The people of the Ya family pointed at him from time to time, but Tang Zheng ignored them. He only stared straight at the room, hoping that the moment the door opened, the figure that haunted his dreams would walk out. "Who is this? Why are you standing here in the dark? Scram to the side." Suddenly, a delicate voice came from behind him. Tang Zheng frowned. Without even turning his head, he knew who it was, Yi Meiyu. Yi Meiyu had used a honey trap on Tang Zheng back then, but Tang Zheng did not react at all, causing her to fly into a rage out of humiliation, and she had always harbored a grudge in her heart. In addition, the good relationship between Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang's family made Yi Tianlei's position in the Ya family more and more stable, which made Yi Meiyu even angrier. Today, Yi Meiyu was in a good mood. A while ago, Yi Dingdang was seriously ill, so she was secretly happy for a long time. Previously, she went to a party and hooked up with a little fresh meat. Only then did she go home in satisfaction. However, she did not expect that not long after she entered the house, she would almost bump into someone. Her good mood was immediately destroyed, and her big mistemper immediately flared up. Seeing that the other party was silent and did not move at all, Yi Meiyu felt that she had been completely ignored. She did not recognize Tang Jing and thought that he was just a servant of the Ya family. She immediately flew into a rage and raised the bag in her hand to smash Tang Jing's head, shouting, "I told you not to open your eyes, I want you to know how powerful I am." Tang Jing could withstand Yi Tianlei's fist, but that did not mean that anyone could hit him. Hearing the sound of the wind behind him, he grabbed onto the other party's bag and forcefully snatched it away. With a "so" sound, the bag turned into a gust of wind and flew over the courtyard wall, disappearing without a trace. After Yi Meiyu's brain went blank for a short period of time, she completely exploded and shouted hysterically, "You dare to resist? Men, capture him and beat him up. When did the Ya family let such an ignorant fellow in?" However, no one responded to her, and no one came to stand up for her and chase away Tang Jing. Yi Tianlei had already given the order to treat Tang Jing as heir and ignore him. Seeing that no one came to help her, Yi Meiyu was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She rushed to the front of Tang Jing and forcefully swallowed the vulgarities that she was about to blurt out. She stared dumbfoundedly at the face that she would never forget even if she became a ghost. "Tang Jing, it's him. Why is he here? Is he here to look for Yi Dingdang again?" Yi Meiyu's expression changed rapidly as she ridiculed, "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's the famous Tang Jing, standing in our courtyard in the middle of the night. Are you here to be our Ya family's guard?" Tang Jing glanced at her and said, "Scram." Immediately, the mocking smile on Yi Meiyu's face froze, her face turned from red to white, and finally to ashen, and said, "Tang Jing, this is the Ya family, it's not your place to be arrogant and despotic." Tang Jing coldly snorted and ignored her, only staring straight at Yi Dingdang's room. Seeing that she was ignored, Yi Meiyu became even angrier. Following his gaze, she immediately locked onto the room and said angrily, "I understand now, you're relying on someone to support you, right? I, Yi Meiyu, have had enough. Today, I want to see how Yi Dingdang colluded with outsiders and came to our Ya family to be so arrogant." After she finished speaking, she rushed to Yi Dingdang's door with large strides and smashed the door, causing it to shake violently. "Yi Dingdang, come out. You're getting more and more powerful. You colluded with outsiders and came to the Ya family to behave atrociously. Do you think that the Ya family belongs to you, Yi Dingdang?" Yi Meiyu complained indignantly. There was no movement in the room. "Yi Dingdang, I know you're inside. You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it. Are you a coward?" Yi Meiyu continued to smash on the door. Tang Jing frowned and berated, "Yi Meiyu, this is none of your business, scram to the side." Hearing the word scram again, Yi Meiyu felt as if her entire body was on fire. She turned her head and glared angrily at Tang Jing. She could not do anything to him, especially now that Tang Jing's strength had increased greatly. Even Yi Xuanji did not dare to look down on him, let alone Yi Meiyu. However, she could not do anything to Tang Jing, but she was not afraid of Yi Dingdang. Moreover, she had long been dissatisfied with Yi Dingdang. With the new and old grudges added together, she completely exploded. She crazily slammed on the door, almost smashing it apart, and shouted, "Yi Dingdang, get out here. Is it fun to be a coward?" Hearing his beloved being insulted like this, how could Tang Jing just sit back and watch? He quickly rushed to the door, grabbed Yi Meiyu's collar, and berated, "Stop." However, Yi Meiyu did not stop. Instead, she felt even more angry and humiliated, and grabbed Tang Jing's face with her hand, shouting hysterically, "You guys are working together to bully me, I'll fight it out with you guys." Tang Jing grabbed her hand. If he was caught, the sharp nails would definitely scratch Tang Zheng's skin, and that would be extremely embarrassing. Seeing that she was making trouble for no reason, Tang Zheng's face darkened, and he snappily scolded her, "If you don't listen to my advice, then don't blame me for being impolite. Why don't you be polite? Are you going to hit me or kill me?" "Alright, Yi Ding-dang, you actually colluded with a wild man outside to kill me, you really have guts." Yi Meiyu clamored, purposely framing Yi Ding-dang. The commotion caused by the two of them was too big. All the servants of the Ya family were pointing at them from afar, but no one dared to come forward to help. This involved the open and hidden struggle between the two brothers of the Ya family. They did not dare to participate. Stop. Chapter 717. Tang Zhang's hand that was holding on to Yi Meiyu froze. He stared at the person who walked out and cried out involuntarily, "Ding dang." Yi Ding-dang's face was as calm as the surface of a lake without a single ripple. She coldly said, "Let her go." Tang Jing released his hand, and when Yi Meiyu regained her freedom, her anger became even stronger. A single sentence from Yi Ding-dang was enough to make Tang Jing obey, but he actually dared to make a move on her, Yi Meiyu. The difference between them was immediately obvious. "Yi Ding-dang, you colluded with outsiders to cause trouble in the Ya family. I'll fight it out with you." After saying that, he pounced on Yi Ding-dang with bared fangs and brandished claws. Yi Ding-dang did not expect Yi Meiyu to be so unreasonable and even dare to make a move. However, at such a close distance, even if her skills were much better than Yi Meiyu's, it would still be useless. Those long nails would definitely scratch Yi Ding-dang's delicate skin, and might even leave scars and disfigure her. "How dare you?" Tang Jing was shocked. His reaction was extremely fast as he blocked Yi Meiyu's path in a flash. Puff! Yi Meiyu's fingernails scratched Tang Zhang's neck, leaving a long mark, but it did not cut through his skin. Instead, Yi Meiyu's fingernails broke with a crack. "Ah!" Yi Meiyu let out a heart-wrenching scream. Holding onto her hand, she immediately retreated and looked at Tang Jing in shock. She had clearly succeeded, but why was the other party not injured at all? That was impossible. However, she did not know that Tang Jing had cultivated the primal chaos Vajra spell. Not to mention his fingernails, as long as he circulated his energy, ordinary weapons would not be able to harm him in the slightest. "You." Yi Ding-dang saw that he had stepped forward bravely to protect her, and her heart couldn't help but be moved. She quickly looked at his neck, deeply afraid that something bad had happened to him. But seeing that there was no serious injury, she swallowed back the words of concern that were about to come out of her mouth. Tang Jing turned around and looked at Yi Ding-dang with a burning gaze. When their eyes met, they could feel each other's breathing. Yi Ding-dang quickly lowered her head and said calmly, "You should leave. What's the point of continuing to cause trouble here? Instead, it will only make others laugh. Ding-dang, listen to my explanation. There's nothing between me and Princess Anne, it's not like what you think." Tang Jing immediately seized this opportunity and explained himself. Yi Ding-dang said calmly, "What is your relationship with her? What does it have to do with me? You don't have to explain it to me. Ding-dang, I know you are still angry at me. The reason why I left this time was because I had something important to do, so I left without saying goodbye. I really had no choice but to do so. I only just found out that you fell sick after I left. It is all my fault. When you were at your weakest, I was not by your side. In the future, I will definitely spend more time with you." Yi Ding-dang's eyes showed some fluctuations, but her face didn't change in the slightest. She said, "I don't want to hear this. It's useless for you to say this to me. I also don't need you to accompany me. You have so many women, you can accompany them as much as you want." Tang Jing finally knew where the crux of the matter was. She wasn't angry with Princess Anne, but his messy relationship with other women. But now that things had come to this, he had no way of abandoning other women. He couldn't do this. It wasn't because he was a playboy, but because of his responsibility as a man. He made a promise to them, so he would use his life to keep this promise. Even if there were many difficulties and obstacles, he would do it regardless of rain or shine. This was a dead end. He couldn't give Yi Dingdang what she needed. A complete Tang Jing who completely belonged to Yi Dingdang. Looking at her expressionless face, Tang Zhang's heart ached. Even if he had the ability to reach the heavens, there was no way to resolve the current situation. Tang Zhang wasn't a domineering person. On the contrary, he was very good at taking care of other people's feelings, especially the feelings of women. He and Yi Dingdang definitely had feelings for each other. After going through so much together, their feelings for each other weren't shallow. But for various reasons, he couldn't meet Yi Dingdang's expectations. Or it could be said that Yi Dingdang had misophobia when it came to relationships. She wouldn't allow her man to be owned by another woman. She needed a complete man. Tang Zhang had a deep sense of frustration. No matter how many difficulties he had experienced in the past and how he had hovered on the edge of life and death, he had never been so depressed. Looking at Yi Dingdang's eyes in a daze, Tang Zhang asked, "Can you really not forgive this?" Yi Dingdang heard the strange emotion in his voice and raised her head. Their eyes met. Yi Dingdang's heart ached, but she still asked loudly, "How do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to watch you fool around with other women in the future? Do you want me to sleep with other women? I, Yi Dingdang, can't do it. Maybe I thought I could do it in the past, but later I realized that I can't do it. My feelings can't be tarnished. My feelings for you are real," Tang Zhang added. "But it's already been divided into several parts. I need a complete one. Can you give it to me?" Yi Dingdang seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and expressed her feelings completely. Tang Zhang was speechless. He couldn't give her a complete one. This was a dead knot. Yi Dingdang looked at him mockingly and said, "You have nothing to say now, right? Since that's the case, why are you still pestering me? There won't be a result in the end anyway. I don't like things that don't end well. Are you serious?" Tang Zhang asked unwillingly. Yi Dingdang raised her head high and said, "When have I, Yi Dingdang, ever not been serious?" Yes. Back then, when she was with Tang Zhang, she was incomparably serious. Of course, now that they were going to separate, she was also serious. Although there were 1,000 voices in her heart telling her not to do this, she still insisted in the end. This was Yi Dingdang. If she compromised, she wouldn't be Yi Dingdang. "Alright, since you're so insistent, I can't do anything about it." Tang Zhang compromised. Although he was extremely unwilling, this was an unsolvable problem. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't solve it. This was because he couldn't give up on other women. "Dingdang, this is a sword that I specially chose for you. This is my final gift to you. When I'm not by your side in the future, this clear wind sword will protect you from me." Tang Zhang took out the clear wind sword. He had specially chosen it for Yi Dingdang in the Langya Pavilion because it was very compatible with the wind-chasing sword technique. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword and shook her head, "I don't need it." Tang Zhang didn't allow her to refuse and stuffed it into her hands. It was cool and gentle to the touch. Her skin moved his heart, but he wouldn't be able to touch it in the future. He reluctantly let go of his hand. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword in her hands and then looked at Tang Zhang's persistent eyes. Her heart softened and she said, "All right, I'll accept your gift." "Thank you." Tang Zhang's lips twitched and he forced out a smile. His smile was uglier than crying and was 1,000 times more bitter as he said, "Then take care of yourself." "You too." Yi Dingdang looked at him as if she wanted to deeply imprint his appearance in her mind, afraid that she would forget him in the future. They both knew that they couldn't be friends after breaking up like normal couples. They couldn't do it because their feelings for each other were too deep. When their feelings were too deep, if they couldn't have each other, they couldn't force themselves to be friends. That would be too cruel and painful. I'm leaving. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and used all his strength to say these 3 words. Yi Dingdang nodded. Tang Zheng turned around, his legs felt as if they were filled with lead. His breathing also became heavy, as if he couldn't catch his breath. However, he did not turn around and walked out of the Yi clan's main door under countless gazes. The others could feel the strong feelings between the two of them, but fate played tricks on them. Sometimes, things just couldn't go as one wished. Only one person was overjoyed. Yi Meiyu almost jumped up in joy and laughed out loud. Yi Dingdang and Tang Zheng's relationship had always been valued by Yi Dingdang, and Yi Meiyu paled in comparison. But now that the two of them had broken up, Yi Dingdang's advantage was gone. When Yi Dingdang was sad, Yi Meiyu was happy, and incomparably happy at that. Seeing her looking at the clear wind sword in her hand in a daze, Yi Meiyu mocked mercilessly, "What's so good about a broken sword? No one wants it even if it's a piece of scrap metal." Yi Dingdang's expression changed. Swoosh, the treasured sword was unsheathed, the sword intent soared into the sky, the bright sword tip was pointed at Yi Meiyu's throat. If it moved another inch, it would pierce through her throat. Yi Meiyu looked as if she had been immobilized. She immediately raised her hands and exclaimed, "Yi Dingdang, what are you doing? If you dare to insult this sword again, and insult Tangjing again, I will use this sword to kill you," Yi Dingdang said with killing intent. Yi Meiyu's entire body trembled. She could see a strong killing intent in Yi Dingdang's eyes. If she dared to speak rudely again, she had no doubt that Yi Dingdang would kill her. I don't dare, I don't dare." Yi Meiyu immediately begged for mercy. Humph. Yi Dingdang snorted coldly. Just as she was about to put away the clear wind sword, a figure appeared beside her, his finger brushed against the sword, and praised, good sword, a rare treasure sword." This ghost-like person was the patriarch of the Ya family, Yi Xuanji. Yi Meiyu was so embarrassed that her cheeks flushed red. Just now, she had said that the sword was a piece of scrap metal, but now, the patriarch praised it as a treasure sword. However, no one cared about Yi Meiyu's embarrassment anymore. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang also walked over. Feng Xinyang's eyes were moist. Looking at her daughter, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. However, in the end, their gazes were still attracted by the clear wind sword, and their eyes could not help but light up. The two of them did not use weapons, but they still had good eyesight. This clear wind sword was definitely the best treasure sword they had ever seen in their lives. "This is too precious," Yi Tianlei exclaimed. "Dingdang, can I take a look?" Yi Xuanji asked for his opinion. Yi Dingdang nodded. When Yi Xuanji received the clear wind sword, his expression changed greatly. The clear wind sword was as light as air. He had never heard of such a sword before. Immediately, he knew that he had underestimated the value of the sword. This was not an ordinary treasure sword, but a peerless treasure sword. It was a divine weapon that countless warriors yearned for even in their dreams. Chapter 7:18. Yi Xuanji stared blankly at the clear wind sword and asked, "Dingdang, do you know where he got this sword from?" Yi Dingdang was not in the mood at all as she shook her head. Yi Xuanji could also see that she was in low spirits, but he still had too many questions in his heart, so he did not give up and continued to ask, "Although this is a peerless treasure sword, because it is too extraordinary, it can be said to be of little use to ordinary warriors." "Oh, why is that?" Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang curiously asked. "Because it is too light. Normal martial arts cannot control this treasure sword," Yi Xuanji mysteriously said. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang were suddenly enlightened. That's right, how could a normal weapon not have weight? This kind of weapon was like air and normal people could not control it. It required a set of martial arts. But as far as they knew, they had never heard of this kind of martial arts. For a moment, the three of them felt regret. Having a godly weapon but not being able to use it, this was one of the biggest regrets of a martial artist. Yi Dingdang heard their conversation and expressionlessly said, Tang Zheng has already taught me a set of sword techniques that can control this clear wind sword. He has already taught you a set of sword techniques. What sword techniques? The others were shocked as they could not help but recall the time when Tang Zheng taught her the Jade Maiden Heart Sutra. The Jade Maiden Heart Sutra was a rare martial art book for normal martial artists. But in Tang Zheng's hands, it was like a cabbage that was casually given away. The sword technique this time must be even more extraordinary, but Tang Zheng had already taught it to Yi Dingdang without anyone knowing. Even the other members of the Ya family did not know. This was just too shocking. Wind-chasing sword technique. Yi Dingdang indifferently said as she turned around and left. Dingdang, your clear wind sword. Yi Xuanji quickly returned the clear wind sword to her. Although he knew that the clear wind sword was a peerless divine weapon, he would not covet this weapon. Yi Dingdang then took it and rushed into the room with large strides. With a bang, the door was shut tight. The others looked at each other, speechless. Yi Meiyu looked at the tightly shut door with red eyes, thinking that Tang Zheng was really blind, to actually be so good to Yi Dingdang. Not only did he give her such a precious sword, he even matched it with the corresponding martial arts. Why didn't he have this kind of luck? The heavens were unfair. Tang Zheng opened the door in a daze and saw Princess Anne sitting on the sofa, watching TV intently. Princess Anne was wearing a silk nightgown. It was very light, and even a little translucent. Her underwear was faintly discernible, and it was very eye-catching. However, at this moment, it did not attract Tang Zheng's attention at all. Tang Zheng walked past her in a daze, not even looking at her. Tang Zheng, what's wrong with you? And no longer called Tang Zheng an immortal, but called him by his name. Tang Zheng ignored her. In fact, deep down in his heart, he still blamed Princess Anne. If not for her arrival, he would not have ignited the fuse and caused Yi Dingdang to leave him. However, deep down in his heart, he also understood that he was just twisting words and forcing logic to excuse himself. At the end of the day, the crux of all of this was him. If he did not have so many romantic debts, Yi Dingdang would naturally not have left him. Therefore, he forcefully suppressed the disappointment and anger in his heart and did not lose his temper at Anne. And looked at him with a strange expression. How could she, who was extremely smart, not see through Tang Zheng's abnormal reaction? There's a problem. Didn't he go to see Yi Dingdang? Could it be that he had a conflict with Yi Dingdang? And guessed. If there's anything, you can tell me. I can also help you solve your problems. And volunteered and blocked Tang Zheng's way. Tang Zheng casually pushed her away and pressed his hands on her chest. However, the moment he touched her, he pulled away without any improper thoughts. Princess Anne immediately froze. She watched as Tang Zheng entered the bedroom and closed the door. Her mind was still blank. He actually touched my chest. She, who had been pampered since she was young, had never been taken advantage of by other men. She had a strange feeling in her heart. However, Westerners were much more open-minded in this aspect than Easterners. She did not really hold Tang Zheng responsible for this matter. She only looked at the closed door with a complicated expression. Her hand couldn't help but rub the place where Tang Zheng had pushed her. Inside the room, Marshall was originally lying on the bed. She thought that Tang Zheng would not come back tonight, so she felt a little disappointed. However, when she saw that Tang Zheng had returned, she jumped up from the bed like a carp, but when she saw Tang Zheng's expression, she was stunned. She had been with Tang Jing for so long, but she had never seen such an expression on his face. It was as if he had lost his soul. Wu's heart skipped a beat as a strong sense of unease and worry welled up within him. She quickly supported him and asked, "What happened to you?" Tang Jing shook his head and said, "I'll rest for a while." After he finished speaking, he laid down on the bed, his eyes wide open as he stared at the ceiling. Wu was shocked and quickly touched his forehead. He didn't have a fever, but his dark and lifeless eyes made her feel confused. "Tang Jing, just what happened?" She snuggled up to the bed and stared at him as she asked. Tang Jing stared at the ceiling, his eyes gradually turning red. The emotions that he had accumulated all the way finally exploded as he said involuntarily, "Ding Dang and I have broken up." Hiss. Wu was so shocked by this news that she sucked in a breath of cold air, her entire body trembling. She was very clear about the inextricable entanglement between Tang Jing and Yi Dingdang. One had to know that when Wu first met Tang Jing, Yi Dingdang was by his side and was even being chased by Wu together. Therefore, the two of them shared life and death. This friendship was something that ordinary people would find difficult to achieve. In fact, Wu had to admit that his position in Tang Zhang's eyes was definitely not as high as Yi Dingdang's. However, the two of them had actually broken up. This was no different from a bolt from the blue. Why? Why is she so stupid? Wu asked in disbelief. She really wanted to reach the position that Yi Dingdang had in Tang Zhang's eyes, but that was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. She did not expect that Yi Dingdang would have such a great advantage, but would voluntarily withdraw. "It's not that she's stupid, it's that I'm a bastard. I'm too greedy." Tang Jing muttered. He was indeed greedy. He couldn't bear to let go of any woman beside him unless they took the initiative to leave him like Yi Dingdang. Then there was nothing he could do. Of course, after he urged her to stay, he wouldn't pester her. That wasn't his style. Everyone had their own choices. Even though he was extremely reluctant, he still respected the other party's choice. Wu blinked and roughly guessed what was going on. However, he still asked, "You're so good, how could she bear to leave you?" Everyone has their own principles and perseverance. It's different. Tang Jing shook his head and said absent-mindedly. Looking at his pained expression, Wu did not gloat. She had lost another competitor. Instead, she felt heart-wrenching pain. Because if Tang Jing was in pain, she would be in 100 times more pain than him. She couldn't help but hug Tang Jing into her embrace, allowing his head to lean against her full chest. She gently stroked his head and said, "I won't leave you. I'll never leave you." This was a decision she had made a long time ago. At this moment, she couldn't help but say it out loud. It was extremely natural and there wasn't the slightest bit of inconsistency. Tang Zhang's heart moved. He raised his head, looked at her beautiful face, and asked, "Really?" Wu nodded heavily without hesitation. "Absolutely." Tang Jing squeezed out a smile, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. During this period of time, he was simply too tired. His nerves were highly concentrated, and his body and mind were exhausted. After experiencing the unforeseen event with Yi Dingdang, his body and mind were even more exhausted. He couldn't help but fall asleep in Wu's embrace. Wu's embrace was very warm and soft, giving him an unprecedented sense of peace. Wu was slightly startled. Looking at him sleeping soundly like a mischievous boy, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile. He hugged him even tighter, pressed his face against his face, and smelled the scent of his body. His heart was exceptionally satisfied. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight shone in through the window. Tang Jing opened his eyes in a daze. Why is it so soft?" He rolled his eyes and discovered that he was actually lying in Wu's embrace. His head was resting on her chest, and that beautiful hemisphere had been pressed to the point of being deformed. He suddenly realized what had happened last night. He had actually fallen asleep just like that. She had hugged him all night. He slightly got up, wanting to crawl out of her embrace, but heard a groan. Wu Yu woke up, and when she saw Tang Jing on her chest, her face immediately flushed red. She looked flustered and stammered, "You're awake." Tang Jing squeezed out a smile and said, "Yes, I'm awake." After saying that, he quickly got up from her body. "Thank you for last night. You should have woken me up. You must be exhausted after sitting like this for an entire night." "I'm fine. Seeing how tired you are, I can't bear to wake you up." Wu Ho did not finish her sentence. In fact, she also enjoyed the feeling of Tang Jing lying in her embrace. If the two of them could lie together like this for the rest of their lives, it would be a great blessing. "Last night, Wu said hesitantly. Tang Jing waved his hand and said, "Everything is in the past. A new day, a new beginning." Obviously, after a night of adjustment, Tang Zhang's emotions had recovered by 70 to 80%. As a man, he would not be so wishy-washy as to immerse himself in pain. That was not his style. No one who was decisive enough to kill would do that. "I'm going to class today. You can arrange your own time." Wu nodded in agreement. Opening the door and walking out, Princess and immediately stared at the two of them with a thought-provoking gaze. Last night, the two of them had actually slept in the same room. She did not need to waste her brain cells to guess what had happened. In fact, in the middle of the night, she really wanted to listen to the corner of the wall. However, she had renovated the room and the soundproofing effect was too good. She could not hear anything. Looking at Wu's exhausted appearance, Princess Anne understood tacitly. She thought that the two of them must have tossed and turned for the entire night. Her eyes subconsciously looked towards Tang Zhang's lower body. Chapter 719. Princess Anne did not have the chance to gossip about what Tang Zhang and Marshall did last night because Tang Jing directly left after washing up. Princess Anne immediately chased after him but found that he had already disappeared. She could only fiercely stomp her feet to vent the dissatisfaction in her heart. Early in the morning, Tang Jing returned to room 502. His roommates were still sleeping soundly. When they saw Tang Jing, they all jumped out of bed as if they had seen a ghost. They circled around him a few times and said, "Old three, this time you disappeared for so long. Are you all right?" Tang Jing gave a knowing smile and shook his head saying he was fine. TSK, old three, this time you played too big. Yi Ding Dang is very angry with you. You have to think of a way to calm her down." Tang Zhang's expression darkened and said, "I broke up with her." Broke up? The three of them were all shocked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at him in disbelief and said, "Old three, you can't be serious, right?" "It's true," Tang Zhang said solemnly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. They had always thought that Tang Jing and Yi Ding Dang would walk together in the end. Yi Ding Dang's valiant and heroic appearance was not something an ordinary person could handle. But they never thought that fate would make a fool of them and the two of them would break up. The three of them secretly sighed and patted Tang Zhang's shoulder. They said with a heavy tone, "Old three, a real man does not have to worry about not having a wife. Even if you give up this big tree, there is still a forest." Tang Jing did not want to continue this topic and asked, "Did anything happen in school recently?" "Oh, there is one thing. Professor Qi Shaoan has resumed teaching." Tang Jing nodded his head as this was expected. Back then, with the help of Princess Anne, Qi Shaoan was exposed so that the villains behind him could no longer plot against him. Professor Qi naturally recovered his position and work. The other things are not big, but the island nation next door has an earth-shattering event. "Do you know?" Tang Jing nodded calmly. "Serves him right. I wonder which ferocious person is so powerful." If I see him, I'll really have to bow 3 times to him. Tang Jing smiled bitterly. There's no need for that. How is it not necessary? It's very necessary. You don't know how many Huaxia people worship this fierce person. However, this person's identity is too secretive. Normal people can't find out anything about this person. The 3 of them said regretfully. Tang Jing shook his head and smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that his impulsive actions would win him so many fans even though the country was in a passive position. That person might have just done it casually. He didn't think too much about it at that time. Tang Jing said casually. Third brother, this is something you don't know. This kind of brave warrior naturally plans before taking action. How could he not think of so many things? It's just that the various governments are definitely investigating this person's identity. If it's exposed, it will definitely be dangerous. What's there to be afraid of if there's danger? That hero is so powerful, who in this world can hurt him? Yes, he's number 1 in the world, invincible in the world. The 3 of them were impassioned, cheering for this idol they had never met. Looking at this scene, Tang Jing laughed strangely. In the end, his laughter grew louder and louder. The 3 of them looked at Tang Jing strangely and said, Third brother, although we said that hero is the best in the world, you're not bad either. We definitely don't mean to belittle you. Yes, absolutely not. You're our good brother. You're different from that hero. The others echoed. Tang Jing clutched his stomach and laughed until he couldn't straighten his back. He looked at the 3 of them strangely and asked, Do you really want to see that person? Of course, I want to see him even in my dreams. The 3 of them nodded like they were pounding garlic. Suddenly, Zhou Yan had an idea. Third brother, we know that you know a lot of strange people. Could it be that you know this hero? In an instant, the other 2 also looked at Tang Jing with eyes full of anticipation. Tang Jing pretended to smile mysteriously and said, Is this person really that important to you? Of course, my idol. I didn't chase after stars before, but ever since I saw his feats, he's my idol. Sinosaurus patted his hard chest and said solemnly. All right, then I'll reveal the mystery. Your idol is far away in the horizon, but right in front of you. Tang Jing raised his hands and said to himself. Is my idol here? Where is he? The 3 of them looked at each other in dismay and swept their eyes around, trying to find traces of their idol. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pointed to himself and said, Isn't the one standing in front of you me? It's you. The 3 of them didn't understand for a moment, but as soon as they finished speaking, the 3 of them opened their eyes wide and stared straight at Tang Jing. As if they had just woken up from a dream, they said, Third brother, you're saying that our idol is you? You're that fierce person. Tang Jing smiled and nodded his head in acknowledgement. This was not something he did on a whim. A long time ago, he had the thought of helping his roommates become cultivators. However, at that time, the cultivators were weak and were being chased by the martial sect. If he let them become cultivators, it would be like pushing them into a fire pit. Of course, Tang Jing couldn't do such a thing to his friend, so this plan was put on hold. He specially refined a type of elixir, the energy cultivation pill, and let his roommates eat it as snacks. Unknowingly, the 3 roommates' bodies had undergone earth-shattering changes, but they were completely unaware of it. The energy cultivation pill could cleanse one's marrow and improve one's physique, making the body more suitable for cultivation. The 3 of them were completely unaware that they had received such a huge benefit. They just kept glaring at Tang Jing. Tang Jing smiled at the 3 of them. Finally, the 3 of them confirmed that Tang Jing was not joking. Moreover, Tang Jing rarely joked. His idol was actually his roommate, Lao San. Damn, Lao San, you disappeared for no reason this time because you went to the island nation. Sinosaurus exclaimed as he punched Tang Jing's chest. The other two woke up from their stupor and said, Lao San, you're awesome. We always knew that you were very powerful, but we never thought that you would be this powerful. Idol, so Lao San is an idol. Come, everyone must hug one together. I dream of hugging an idol. The four of them hugged each other. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the three of them. After a while, he retracted his smile and said seriously, Boss, Lao Si, I want to tell you a secret. Are you willing to keep it a secret? Wang Shiji and Zhou Yan looked at each other and nodded. Of course, we're not big mouths. Sinosaurus's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Tang Jing and guessed his thoughts. Sinosaurus had already become a cultivator by chance. Now, if the other two brothers could also become cultivators, then the four of them would roam the world together in the future. How exciting would that be? Just thinking about it made him so excited that he couldn't sleep. This is a very big secret. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid that you would be in danger, but now that things are different, the situation has changed drastically, telling you might not be a bad thing. Moreover, all the decisions are in your hands, I will respect your choice. Tang Zheng said seriously. Seeing Tang Jing being so serious, Zhou Wang and Wang Shiji's expressions gradually became serious as they listened attentively to Tang Zheng's explanation. There are three types of people in this world. One is an ordinary person, and the other is a martial artist. You are relatively familiar with these two types of people, but there is a third type of person that you have never heard of. What is the third type of person? The two of them asked curiously at the same time. Cultivator. Tang Zheng said resolutely, cultivators are very different from the first two types of people. When their strength is cultivated to the extreme, they can move mountains and overturn seas. A single person can resist thousands of soldiers and horses. In short, this kind of person's strength seems to have no upper limit. It is completely beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The two of them were dumbstruck. This information had completely overturned their previous understanding. Zhou Yan had an idea. He stared at Tang Jing and asked, Lao San, then you are a cultivator? Tang Jing nodded truthfully. Not only am I a cultivator, Lao Er has also been a cultivator for a long time. Lao Er. Their gazes immediately locked onto the tall Sinosaurus. Sinosaurus scratched his head in embarrassment and said, Lao San and Lao Si, don't be angry. We didn't tell you the truth this time because we had no choice. Moreover, I only became a cultivator at the beginning of this semester. All of this is thanks to Lao San, otherwise I would have lost my life long ago. F***CK, doesn't that mean that we have two cultivators in our dorm? Of course. Tang Jing nodded and added, furthermore, how many cultivators we have in our dorm in the future will depend on your attitudes. The two of them were not idiots. They immediately realized the crux of the matter and quickly asked, you mean that the two of us can also become cultivators like you, and have the ability to move mountains and fill seas? I have already made preparations for you. Do you still remember the pills I gave you before? That is the Peiyuan Dan, it has already transformed your bodies. In the future, your cultivation will be twice as fast with half the effort. Tang Jing explained. Peiyuan Dan. Not only Wang Zhou and Zhou Yan, even Sinosaurus had a face full of surprise as he exclaimed, the little bean-like thing you gave us before was actually a pill to help us improve our physique. You're being too good to us. We're all brothers, so this is what we should do. Lao San, Lao Si, then discuss it and see if you're willing to become a cultivator? Zhou Yan asked, are you saying that we can gallop around the world like you in the future? Of course. But why did you tell us before? What exactly happened to the situation? It's hard to explain in a few words. But one thing is certain, the world of the past will never return. Cultivators will quickly rise in this world and have a place for themselves. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Although he was not willing to bring back the cultivators of the sky beyond heaven, it did not mean that he did not welcome other cultivators. If the other party was a native cultivator of this world, then he would definitely welcome them with open arms. Chapter 720. In the face of such a good thing, Zhou Yan and Wang Shiji agreed without any hesitation. Every man yearned to become stronger from the bottom of his heart and had a dream of becoming a hero. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, wouldn't he be a fool if he didn't seize it immediately? Tang Zheng immediately taught them the basic knowledge of cultivation, and also taught them the god-killing method that he had taken out from the Langya Pavilion. After that, the four of them went to class. After experiencing the continuous battles of the island nation and returning to the peaceful life of a university, Tang Zheng's heart couldn't help but calm down. Furthermore, he had delayed too many classes, so he had to make up for it as soon as possible. Although going to school was only a kind of experience for him, he still took it very seriously. The other students were already used to Tang Zheng's elusive appearance. This archaeology department, or even Yenqing University's anomaly, was far from what others could compare to. During this period of time, he was prepared to stay in school for a while. Moreover, with Princess and at home, he would definitely be harassed when he went back. In addition, he had originally planned to meet Lu Qingmei, but she seemed to have transformed into a workaholic and was still on a business trip. As for the company, with Mu Hongyan overseeing it, he did not need to ask about it. Proportion as a result, he became the most idle person. Of course, this was only on the surface. He still had a lot of things to do. This island nation experience had given him a lot of inspiration and benefited him a lot. Every battle that he had experienced was worth reflecting on. This was very beneficial to his cultivation. In addition, he had already cultivated to the 9th level of Anidia, and was only a step away from the Aurus core stage. This was a very critical moment. He had to cultivate well and condense a golden core. This was an extremely important period for a cultivator. If he failed to condense a golden core, then he would be rejected from entering the golden core stage. He would no longer have the opportunity to improve his cultivation, which would undoubtedly be a fatal blow. Furthermore, the higher the quality of the condensed Aurus core, the faster his future cultivation would be. After class, the few of them ate dinner together. Just as they were about to return to the dormitory, they were stopped by Yi Dingdong's roommates. The three women were like three tigresses who came to denounce them. They already knew that the two of them had broken up. Of course, they believed that Tang Zheng had abandoned her and hurt Yi Dingdong. Fortunately, his roommate came to his rescue, and Tang Zheng was finally able to escape from the women's battle of words. Of course, he did not blame the three of them. They stood up for Dingdong, and this kind of friendship was rare and precious. It made him feel gratified for Dingdong. He walked around the campus aimlessly, looking at the lush trees and the various teaching buildings hidden under the big trees. He realized that he had not seriously strolled around the campus, and the school was so unfamiliar to him. Thus, he strolled around the campus alone, like a lonely traveler, blending into the beautiful scenery of the campus. Unknowingly, he arrived in front of an office building. He suddenly remembered that Professor Qi Shaowen's office was inside, so he walked in. When he opened the door, he found that the room was full of documents. Professor Qi was buried in all kinds of documents, and his thin body was almost buried by the documents. He flipped through all kinds of documents as if there was no one around. His expression was sometimes excited, sometimes depressed, like a madman. Tang Zheng was shocked. Didn't Professor Qi already return to work? How did he become like this? He looked even more down and out than before. Professor Qi. Tang Zheng called out softly. Professor Qi did not raise his head and said, "You're a delivery man, right? Put the food on the table. The money is on the table, take it yourself." Delivery. Tang Zheng was stunned and looked at the table by the door. There was indeed money on the table, and the trash can beside it was full of fast food boxes. He didn't even have time to go out for a meal, and he stayed in the office all this time. Tang Zheng was shocked. This was like going crazy. He strode over and snatched the documents from his hands. Professor Qi resisted and tried to take them back, but when he raised his head and saw Tang Zheng's face, he was stunned and said, "Tang Zheng, why are you here?" Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Professor Qi, what's wrong with you?" "I'm fine. I'm just researching." "There's no need to be so crazy about researching. Your body can't take it." "What's wrong with this?" "When I was young, I did research for days and nights without sleep." Tang Zheng looked at the bony Professor Qi and shook his head. "But you're not the same as when you were young." Professor Qi turned a deaf ear and said, "Tang Zheng, you came at the right time. I've made some new discoveries recently, and I'm sure you'll be interested." "Professor Qi, it won't be too late for you to rest first." Looking at his appearance, Tang Zheng was worried that he would collapse at any moment. Professor Qi was in high spirits and said, "What's the point of resting? That's just a waste of time. Why don't you take a look at this?" Professor Qi pulled out a picture from a pile of documents. "What is this?" Tang Zheng took it and looked at it. It was a bronze mask, and he felt a sense of déjà vu. He suddenly slapped his head as he finally remembered where this feeling came from. When Professor Qi gave him his first class, he brought a bronze mask. Tang Zheng also saw a flow of air in the mask. This flow of air was pure spiritual energy, and after absorbing this spiritual energy, his true Qi actually increased. Not only that, if the spiritual energy was abundant enough, it could also nourish the 9 revolving pill furnace and increase its quality. In short, this spiritual energy was too important. Later on, he saw a similar antique in Old Way's antique shop, Imperial Treasury. Later on, he found out that these antiques were ancient sacrificial tools, but after that, he never saw another similar antique again, so Tang Zheng forgot about it. He never thought that he would see it again today. Moreover, it was clear that the bronze mask in this picture was different from the one he saw before. Seeing Tang Zheng's expression change, Professor Qi proudly said, "Ha, I knew you'd be interested." "Professor Qi, did you find this kind of mask again?" Tang Zheng curiously asked. Professor Qi nodded, "Of course. Actually, this is a big surprise." "Oh, why do you say that?" Tang Zheng was also interested. One day, someone went to Old Way's Imperial Treasury to sell antiques, and one of the items was this mask. Old Way remembered that you liked this kind of thing, so he bought it on the spot. However, there was a pleasant surprise, and that was that there was another item, which was this. Professor Qi flipped through another photo. This was a painting that had been taken. On it, there was a rough outline of a scene. This was the construction of a palace. The palace towered into the clouds, and the materials were very large. Giant stones and giant trees, giving people a very shocking feeling. In front of the palace, there was a tall altar, and according to the scale of the picture, this altar was the size of 10 football fields. A group of people stood on the altar, densely packed, but the appearance of these people could not be seen clearly because each of them was wearing a bronze mask. Hiss! Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air. With so many bronze masks, how much spiritual energy did they contain? If they were to absorb it, then the effect would be too great. How is it? Professor Qi stared at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze, and asked with a bit of pride. Tang Zheng suddenly raised his head and stared at Professor Qi. "Is this picture real?" Professor Qi nodded seriously. "This is a documentary picture, and everything in the picture should be compared to the real thing. Although the things in the picture are too shocking, I believe that it is real." Tang Zheng also had this kind of intuition. There are many parts of Huaxiao's history that are not very clear, and it is intermittent. Especially the ancient era, it is basically blank, and many of them are filled in by myths, as if someone is deliberately hiding the history of the ancient era. However, that period of history is often very fascinating to historians, but there has been no strong evidence to prove or study that period of history. This painting gave me an idea. Perhaps this is the key to unlocking that magnificent and mysterious period of history. Professor Chi's eyes were shining, and his thirsty look made people unable to help but laugh. Ancient era. Tang Jing subconsciously muttered. He remembered Chi Yu, 100 Change Star Lord. Weren't they people from the ancient era? They definitely knew about that history, and now Tang Zheng's body had the heart of Chi Yu. He also urgently wanted to know about that history. In addition, he was also a Skywalker, and Chi Yu was also a Skywalker. How did Skywalkers come to be? What secrets did Skywalkers have? Modern people couldn't answer, but maybe if they traced back to the ancient era, they would be able to find something. Are you interested? Professor Chi asked. Tang Jing nodded. Where is the person who sold these antiques? Professor Chi's face darkened. Gone. Gone. Tang Jing was disappointed. How can you let him go? This is a big discovery. Professor Chi said helplessly, I also asked Old Wei the same thing, but at that time he didn't completely discover the value of these antiques, so he didn't let the seller stay, and according to Old Wei, the seller didn't come with good intentions, he was not a good person. Tang Jing didn't care, he himself was not a good person, why would he be afraid of evil people? Since Old Wei has seen the seller, then let's go find him and see if we can find any useful information. Also, these antiques must be with him, I can also go and take a look, Tang Jing said impatiently. Professor Chi's face lit up with joy. Okay. The two of them immediately took the photos and rushed out, heading straight to Old Wei's imperial treasure house. At dusk, the two of them finally arrived at their destination. They saw Old Wei sitting at the door with his legs crossed and a cup of tea in his hand, looking at the people coming and going. There were still a few customers in the shop, but with the waiter taking care of them, he didn't need to worry about them. When he saw the two of them, Old Wei put down the cup of tea and quickly walked over. He couldn't help but look at Tang Jing with joy. Young Master Tang, what a rare guest. Old Wei, you are wrong, we have been friends for more than 10 years, you are not as friendly to me as you are to Tang Jing, Professor Chi joked. Chapter 721. After the host and guest sat down, Tang Jing impatiently took out the photo and asked, Old Wei, is this still with you? Old Wei immediately beamed with joy and said, of course it is. When young Master Tang was interested in this kind of thing, I took note of it. This time there was a seller selling it, so I directly bought it. Saying this, he directly took out a bronze mask from a wooden box. Tang Jing took the mask and was overjoyed. This was indeed the thing he was looking for. On top of the mask, there was a flow of spiritual energy. When his hand touched the mask, the spiritual energy quickly merged into his body and turned into true Qi. Seeing Tang Zheng's pleasantly surprised expression, Old Wei's heart finally fell to the ground. Those in the antique business made friends with people from all walks of life. Of course, there was no lack of trouble. If he could have a strong helper like Tang Jing, then there would be less trouble in the future. That was why Old Wei spent so much effort to befriend Tang Jing. Tang Jing, what do you think? Professor Chi curiously asked. Tang Jing suddenly raised his head and handed the mask to Old Wei and nodded, this is it. Professor Chi smiled and said, I told you my eyes were right. Wasn't it because I recognized it first? Otherwise, it would have slipped away from under my nose. Old Wei said as if he wanted to take credit. Professor Chi said, you've got good taste this time, all right. We came here for more important things. Old Wei smiled mysteriously and blinked. I already guessed that you would come looking for me. Oh. Professor Chi raised his eyebrows. You can even predict. Then why don't you tell us why we came looking for you? Old Wei's finger tapped on the bronze mask a few times and said with a mysterious smile, you came to ask about the origin of these things. Didn't you say you didn't know? Professor Chi asked. Is there anything in the antique business that I don't know? Old Wei boasted. So you know. Then why did you say you didn't know when I asked you last time? Professor Chi glared at him and asked. Old Wei wagged his finger and said, See, I don't understand your fiery temper. If I had told you back then, it might not have been a good thing for you. Now that young Master Tang is back, it's a different story. Professor Chi frowned and said, What exactly are you up to? Seeing that Tang Zheng was also listening attentively, Old Wei did not keep him in suspense. He coughed lightly and said, Listen carefully, the sellers of these things are not good people. They are grave robbers. Grave robber. Tang Zheng and Professor Chi cried out in alarm at the same time. As a serious ancient examiner, they hated tomb robbers very much. For the sake of benefits, these people wantonly destroyed ancient tombs and cultural relics. Many of the ancient tombs that they stole were in a mess, and many of the precious cultural relics were destroyed. This was the most pitiful thing for the ancient examiner. Moreover, grave robbers often sold cultural relics overseas for profit. This kind of behavior was outrageous. Immediately, Professor Chi flew into a rage and said, Then why don't you call the police and arrest these people? Old Wei shook his head and smiled bitterly, Old Chi, I'm an antique shop. Unlike you, an archaeology professor, it's possible for us to deal with these people in our line of work. If I call the police, how can I survive in this line of work in the future? Every line of work has its own rules. People in the martial arts world have no choice. Professor Chi was startled when he heard this. He also knew that his words were too businesslike. As an authority in the archaeology world, he understood the twists and turns in it. He knew that Old Wei's words were not false. Moreover, these grave robbers are all bloodthirsty. If they know that I'm the one who called the police, I'm afraid that my old life will be in their hands in the end. Old Wei added. Professor Chi's face turned red and said, Old Wei, I didn't think it through. Please don't take it to heart. As an old friend for decades, he naturally did not want Old Wei to put himself in danger. Do you think I don't know you well? Old Wei waved his hand indifferently. His gaze turned and fell on Tang Jing. Young Master Tang is different. I'll tell young Master Tang about these grave robbers. He will definitely have a way to deal with them. Tang Jing smiled faintly and nodded. Old Wei is very thoughtful. It's just a group of grave robbers. Of course, I have a way. Old Wei clapped his hands and smiled. Good. This group of grave robbers is quite large. I've sent people to follow them for a while. They're active in Beijing, but according to my observations, they're preparing for their next operation. Furthermore, I heard that they're going to rob a large ancient tomb. Then we can't let them leave Beijing. We have to capture them immediately and interrogate them to find out where these things came from. Tang Zheng said impatiently. Professor Chi also nodded. That's right. We can't let them rob the next ancient tomb. Looking at the two men's impatient and indignant expressions, Old Wei quickly stopped them. Don't be hasty. Things aren't as simple as you think. If you want to know the origin of these things, don't act rashly. I've already found out that they are going to rob the same ancient tomb as the last one. These things were stolen from that ancient tomb. It's just that they didn't prepare enough last time, so they only took a little bit of the loot. This time, they are going to do something big. That's why they bought a lot of equipment and materials. Tang Zhang and Professor Chi looked at each other. They were overjoyed. This way, they would be able to find the source. As long as they could find that ancient tomb, they might be able to find the answers that they had been looking for. Tang Zhang was very excited. If they could really solve many of the ancient secrets, or the secrets of the Skywalkers, then it would be very important to him. It was even more important than increasing his cultivation by a few levels. Professor Chi rubbed his palms together and said, "So you're saying that we have to follow them all the way, like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind?" Old Wei nodded, "Of course." "Then hurry up and tell us the location. We will follow those damn tomb robbers." "Old Chi, don't be so anxious. If you act too hastily and alert the enemy, then the gains won't make up for the losses." Old Wei hurriedly advised, "This group of people won't leave the capital so soon. They're still preparing. When they are about to leave, I will inform young Master Tang, and he will follow them." "I want to go too," Professor Chi volunteered. Old Wei frowned. "Old Chi, you are not a young man anymore. You will definitely not be safe if you follow those tomb robbers. Are you sure your body can do it? It will be bad if you cause trouble for young Master Tang." "No, I have to go," Professor Chi insisted. The temptation this time was too big. Professor Chi couldn't resist at all. Looking at his stubborn eyes, Tang Zheng's heart moved. "It's okay, I will take care of you when the time comes." Professor Chi had helped him so much, so how could Tang Zheng leave him alone? Even if it was a little more burden, he didn't care. In fact, Tang Zheng had another idea in his mind. Why don't he just directly knock on their door and force them to tell him the location of the ancient tomb? But after thinking about it, these tomb robbers still had accomplices, so he had to cast a long line to catch a big fish and catch them all in one fell swoop. He couldn't let any fish escape the net, otherwise it would be a disaster for the archaeological world. Seeing that Tang Zheng had agreed, Professor Chi was ecstatic. He shook Tang Zheng's hand excitedly. Old Wei helplessly shook his head and could only agree. "Oh right, take out that painting and let Tang Zheng take a look," Professor Chi urged. Old Wei took out another painting. This painting was already somewhat damaged. Tang Zheng glanced at it and found that there was no movement of spiritual energy, but seeing the painting with his own eyes, he still felt deeply shaken. The towering palace, the huge altar, and the mysterious sacrificial ceremony all exuded a mysterious aura. This painting doesn't have any spiritual energy. It seems that not everything in the ancient tomb contains spiritual energy. Tang Zheng came to a conclusion. He wasn't disappointed. Instead, he felt that it was normal. If everything contained spiritual energy, it would be an unimaginable amount. After chatting for a while, he left and went back to wait for Old Wei's news. Since there were still a few days before departure, Tang Zheng decided not to return to the dormitory. He decided to use this time to calm down and cultivate. Where was the best place to cultivate in the capital? Of course, it was the Imperial City. Moreover, his dragon god technique had made a breakthrough and he had gained a lot in the Langya Pavilion. It was a good opportunity to communicate with the five-clawed golden dragon. The Imperial City was particularly quiet at night. Without the hustle and bustle of tourists during the day, it was like a sleeping lion. He went to the bottom of the Imperial City with ease and saw the five-clawed golden dragon. However, the five-clawed golden dragon complained to him. This was because he didn't bring Xiao Bai with him. The five-clawed golden dragon seemed to have established a deep friendship with Xiao Bai. Although the five-clawed golden dragon still didn't understand Xiao Bai's origins. However, the five-clawed golden dragon's attention was attracted by Tang Zheng's cultivation. In just a few days, Tang Zheng had risen several levels. More importantly, his dragon god technique had actually reached the third level. The five-clawed golden dragon's huge eyes widened. Although it had already expected this, it was still shocked by this rocket-like speed. He chattered and excitedly said that he would see the light of day soon. After it calmed down for a while, Tang Zheng talked about what he had seen and heard in the island nation. When he mentioned the Yamata no Orochi, the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes immediately lit up. It exclaimed, "You saw the Yamata no Orochi?" Seeing his big reaction, Tang Zheng was quite curious and asked, "Yes, isn't it said that the Yamata no Orochi almost transformed into a 9-clawed golden dragon? It's more powerful than you, right? The 5-clawed golden dragon nodded and said, of course it's more powerful than me. This matter caused quite a stir in the dragon clan. If such a murderous Yamata no Orochi transformed into a dragon, it would be the greatest irony and insult to the dragon clan. However, wasn't he destroyed by a mysterious person in the end? So, your dragon clan should thank this person. Tang Jing joked. The 5-clawed golden dragon nodded seriously, yes, but do you know who this person is? Chapter 722. Seeing Tang Jing shake his head, the 5-clawed golden dragon smiled as if he had already expected this reaction. He solemnly said, this person is the first emperor of the human world, Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang. Tang Jing was startled. Anyone who studied history would know this person. In the past, Huaxia was filled with warlords and 7 countries roamed freely. Qin Shi Huang established a prosperous era and destroyed the 6 countries, unifying the world. From then on, Huaxia entered a new era. So he was the one who broke Yamata no Orochi's dream of transforming into a dragon. Tang Jing sighed. This generation's hero was truly extraordinary. Of course, this matter was not recorded in history. Let me tell you, the Qin Shi Huang that you humans know is only the tip of the iceberg. You don't even know his true identity. Why was he able to destroy the 6 countries and unify the world? At that time, the world was filled with experts. What did he rely on to accomplish this? The 5-clawed golden dragon continued to ask. Tang Jing was confused. How could he know these things? At that time, Huaxia was filled with cultivators. Each country had a large number of experts. You can imagine how terrifying that battle was and how powerful each country was. But Qin Shi Huang was able to accomplish this in a short 10 years. What he relied on was his identity. What identity? Tang Zhang's eyes shined as he asked. A celestial. What? A celestial? Tang Jing was shocked. He almost jumped up. How could there be another celestial? Qi Yu was a celestial. How could Qin Shi Huang also be a celestial? You're also a celestial. How could you be scared? The 5-clawed golden dragon laughed. Tang Jing helplessly smiled. It was precisely because he was a celestial that he was scared. The identity of a celestial was filled with too many unknowns. Is being a celestial not good? How many people dream of being a celestial? The 5-clawed golden dragon disapprovingly said. You said that Qin Shi Huang's identity as a celestial had something to do with unifying the world. What is the connection? Tang Jing changed the topic. The 5-clawed golden dragon unhappily glared at him, and said, of course it has something to do with it. Skywalker's cultivation speed is extremely fast, they are blessed by the heavens, they will always do something that will shake the heavens and shake the earth. This is destined to be an extraordinary life. What is so strange about unifying the world? Then why didn't he live a long life? The 5-clawed golden dragon sighed and said, a celestial's cultivation is profound, and their lifespan is naturally not short. However, Qin Shi Huang unified the world and killed who knows how many people. The sin of killing was too heavy, and it harmed the harmony of the heavens. The heavens punished him, and even though he was a celestial, he couldn't live to 100 years old. You should know that he sent people everywhere to search for the immortal recipe for immortality, but in the end, they still found nothing. This is his fate. Tang Jing sighed faintly. A prodigy of a generation had fallen just like that. However, the matter of killing caused Tang Jing to become vigilant, and he asked curiously, isn't the world of cultivators a place where the strong preys on the weak? Why can't we kill? Of course you can. The 5-clawed golden dragon said, it's just that Qin Shi Huang's sin of killing is too heavy, the number of people who died in his hands is no less than 1,000,000. This kind of sin of killing is not something that the heavens can tolerate. With 1,000,000 lonely souls haunting him, ordinary people would have died a long time ago. It is already commendable that he could live for so long. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. This did not affect him much. He was not a homicidal maniac. How could he kill so many people? Moreover, he was not in a hurry to save people, especially to the general public. He was still benevolent. Since Qin Shi Huang was so powerful, why didn't he directly kill Yamada no Orochi and let it escape? The five-clawed golden dragon snorted and said, "You think too simply. Do you know how powerful Yamada no Orochi was when it transformed into a dragon? In this world, except for Qin Shi Huang, there is no second person who can do this. Moreover, Qin Shi Huang was haunted by 1,000,000 lonely souls and his strength was greatly reduced, so dealing with Yamada no Orochi was already very difficult. Letting Yamada no Orochi escape was also something that he had no choice but to do." Tang Zheng sighed regretfully and said, "What a pity. If we had killed Yamada no Orochi back then there wouldn't have been so many things after that. Perhaps there wouldn't have been so many deaths in that war a few decades ago. Everything in the world, every bite and every drink, has its own destiny. How can there be so many perfect things?" The five-clawed golden dragon said. In the next few days, Tang Zheng attended classes during the day and cultivated in the imperial city at night. His cultivation improved more and more, but he was still a step away from the Aura's core stage. However, his cultivation had already been completely consolidated and he had also digested the gains he had gained during this period of time. Especially the changes in the War Soul Sword, he was pleasantly surprised. The black spots on it were getting fewer and fewer, and the dazzling sword body was slowly being exposed, as if it was undergoing a transformation. During this time, Yan Luyun invited him to a meal and even went to Ji Wuxiang's clubhouse. However, this time, he did not see this mysterious Ji Wuxiang. Tang Zheng's relationship with the Yan family was getting deeper and deeper. Tang Zheng also found out another thing, and that was that the Ya family seemed to be walking together with the Song family again. Back then, because of the marriage between Song Yu and Yi Dingdang, the two families were at odds with each other. Who would have thought that they would be close again today? Yan Luyun directly evaluated that there were no eternal enemies between the great families, only eternal interests. The two families had come together again because they had a common interest. In this way, among the four great families in Beijing, the Yan family was isolated. The Yi and Chu families and the Song family had joined forces, and the Song family's strength had taken a qualitative leap. They were already able to contend with and even suppress the Yan family. Looking at Yan Luyun's indignant expression, Tang Zheng thoughtfully said, "Young Master Yan, please pass on a message to Elder Yan. If there is anything I can help with, I will do my best." Yan Luyun was overjoyed. He had been waiting for these words. The Yan family had placed all their chips on Tang Zheng. Of course, they hoped that he could return the favor and repay them. Currently, these words were full of rewards. Tang Zheng obviously knew the Yan family's thoughts, but he did not reject them. People always needed allies, and this ally of the Yan family was very important to him. After coming back, he had been contacting Tian Chanzi. This old man seemed to have disappeared from the world. There was no news, and he was helpless. Of course, he also contacted Fang Shishir. She was doing well abroad, and the Rockefeller family did not do anything to her. Everything was very peaceful. Mu Hongyan personally came to the school to report the company's operation situation to him. Everything was going well. With the cooperation of the Yan family, everything was going smoothly. Moreover, Linger was also doing well in the entertainment circle. Since the incident with Ji Wuxiang's club last time, Linger's path to stardom had been smooth. Releasing albums, shooting movies, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her popularity had soared, and she was already recognized as a rising star in the entertainment circle. However, there were also things that occasionally caused ripples in Tang Zheng's heart, and that was when he bumped into Yi Dingdang a few times on campus. However, Yi Dingdang completely treated him as air, brushing past him and never looking at him again, causing him to sigh. He had already been repeatedly urged by the five-clawed golden dragon to bring Xiao Bai to the imperial palace. In order to not listen to its nagging, Tang Jing decided to go home once. Moreover, he specifically chose to go home during the day in order to avoid meeting Princess Anne. When he opened the door, as expected, he did not see Princess Annie. Marshall and Lil White were both at home, and when they saw him, a hint of pleasant surprise flashed through the depths of Marshall's eyes. Like a little wife who had reunited after a long time, they warmly welcomed him. Xiao Bai jumped onto his shoulder, hugged his head and kept scratching it, as if complaining that he had not come back to play with it during this period of time. "I came back this time to bring Xiao Bai out," Tang Jing said. When Xiao Bai heard this, he was extremely happy and squeaked non-stop. A hint of disappointment flashed across Wu's eyes. So he didn't come to see him. Tang Jing immediately saw through her thoughts and hurriedly held her hand and said, "I missed you too. I came back to see you." Wu's eyes immediately surged with intense joy as he looked at him with a burning gaze. Tang Zhang's gaze inadvertently landed on Wu's hand. The huge scar immediately attracted all of his attention. He patted his head. He was truly muddle-headed. How could he forget about this matter? The scars on Wu's hands and chest were like ugly centipedes lying on her fair skin. It was a ghastly sight, and every time he saw it, it was like torture. There was no need to mention it to Wu. He had already said that he would remove these scars for her, but he had actually forgotten about it. There was no time like the present. He had to settle this matter today. Seeing him staring straight at his hand, the scar was shocking. Wu was shocked. As if he had been electrocuted, he immediately retracted his hand and hid it behind his back. His face became somewhat pale. Letting the person she loved see her ugly place was something that no woman was willing to do. Wu was no exception. "Wu, I'll heal you right now and remove these scars." Tang Jing grabbed her hand again, his fingers gently brushing across the scar. Wu's entire body trembled unnaturally, but when he felt Tang Zhang's tenderness, he could not bear to break free. When the two of them returned to the bedroom, Tang Jing immediately activated his true qi to wrap around the scar, slowly melting the blood clots in the scar. The scar disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, but after that, no matter how much true qi he activated, he was unable to completely remove the scar. Tang Jing was not depressed, because Tian Chanzi had once said that the scar would need to be healed many times before it could be completely removed, so there was no need to rush it. Seeing that the scar on his hand had been healed, Tang Zhang's gaze subconsciously fell on Wu's chest. Wu's beautiful face could not help but turn red. In order to heal the wound on his chest, he had to take off his clothes. Although the two of them had skin-to-skin contact, it was still embarrassing. "Let me help you," Tang Jing said gently, but from the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Bai staring at him with wide eyes. He immediately kicked it into the bedroom and could not help but laugh as he scolded, "You little pervert, you still want to peek? Where is your place?" Bang! The door closed, leaving only the two of them in the room. Wu could not help but laugh and said, "How would Xiao Bai know about those things? Don't think so badly of it. Don't be fooled by its pure appearance. It knows no less than you. Come, move your hand, I'll take off your clothes." Tang Jing said carelessly, and did not avoid it. His hands naturally landed on the buttons. Chapter 723. The buttons were like little fairies, lightly jumping out of the buttonhole. The shirt was torn open, and the whiteness inside could be clearly seen. Wu's face flushed red. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. Killing enemies on the battlefield was not as uncomfortable. But in order to get rid of that ugly scar, she could only endure it. She secretly sized up Tang Jing and found that his eyes were as clear as water, without the slightest bit of desire, just like a doctor treating a patient. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief, but also feel a little disappointed. Not long later, Marshall's chest was completely exposed in front of Tang Zhang's eyes. Although he had seen it a few times, it was still so beautiful that it could captivate one's soul. Tang Zhang took a deep breath and gently covered his chest with his palm. The warm and delicate feeling caused his heart to ripple. True qi gushed out and wrapped around the wound. The warm feeling made Marshall feel comfortable and even more alluring. Tang Jing calmed himself down with great difficulty and managed to suppress the impulsive demon in his heart. Only then did he complete the healing process. The scar had already faded. After a few more treatments, it would definitely recover to its original state, perfect and flawless. Marshall could not help but look down at her chest, her beautiful eyes shining. The effect was immediate and she could not help but exclaim, "How magical." Tang Jing smiled and said, "Of course it's magical. After a few more treatments, it will be completely healed." After saying that, he could not help but swallow his saliva. The temptation was too strong. Seeing his appearance, Marshall's cheeks flushed red. She hurriedly grabbed her clothes to cover her chest and said coquettishly, "You're not allowed to look." This action of wanting to welcome and rejecting was extremely flirtatious. Tang Zhang's originally restless flame immediately jumped up, and he threw her onto the bed and said, "I want to see." "Ah, you." Marshall was shocked. She covered her chest with both hands, completely losing her usual cold-killing intent. "Quickly get up. It's broad daylight. What if someone sees us?" "Hee, what are you afraid of in broad daylight? Who would look?" Tang Zhang laughed sinisterly. "No way." Wu Yan firmly refused, but before he could finish, his lips were sealed by Tang Zhang's mouth. It was not as violent as a storm, but was exceptionally gentle. Wu's heart immediately softened as she recalled the kiss on the island nation. Just a single kiss had almost melted her body and mind. It was the same this time. This kind of gentle kiss made her unable to resist at all. Although she was usually decisive, when it came to matters between a man and a woman, she reacted strangely to this kind of gentleness and was especially sensitive. When the conditions were right, success came naturally. There was no storm-like attack. The two of them were like a river flowing into the ocean, merging into each other's bodies, and even their souls. After a long time, the wind stopped and the rain stopped. Tang Zhang hugged the naked Marshall and took a deep breath. After this round of exchange, he had absorbed a lot of purine qi. He realized that after his cultivation had greatly increased, the speed at which he absorbed purine qi had also become faster. Of course, the pure yang qi in his body had also increased even faster. The harmony of yin and yang had temporarily reached a fragile balance, but it could be broken at any time. "How's your pure yang qi?" Wu Qingchu laid on Tang Zhang's chest and asked with concern. Tang Zhang rubbed her smooth jade back and said with a smile, "With you here, the pure yang qi will not be able to rebel. It has long been tamed by you." Wu Axian was embarrassed. She fiercely pinched the muscles on his waist and said angrily, "You're really bad." Creak. Suddenly, a clear sound caused the two of them to immediately fall into silence. The two of them had excellent hearing and could easily hear the commotion outside the door. They looked at each other and whispered, "Why is there someone here? It must be Yin who came back. She's not at school in the middle of the day, so why did she run home?" Tang Zhang said unhappily. Marshall was both embarrassed and anxious. She fiercely pinched Tang Zhang and said, "It's all your fault, doing such shameful things in broad daylight. Now that you've been caught, how am I supposed to face her in the future? Anyway, she knows about our relationship. What are you afraid of? Tang Jing simply beat her at her own game and distanced himself from Anne. No, hurry up and jump out of the window. This height won't be a problem for you. Wu Kai refused and quickly pushed Tang Jing out of the bed. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he stood naked on the bed and complained, "Is there a need for that?" "Yes," Marshall said decisively. Crack. But just as he finished speaking, the door was turned and the door was pushed open. Princess Anne stood at the door and said, "You're home." Ah! Before she could finish her sentence, her voice turned into a scream. Her eyes stared straight at Tang Zhang's body. F***ck. Tang Jing felt a chill on his back and reacted quickly. He immediately crawled back into bed and shouted, "What are you doing?" Marshall was already stunned. He quickly covered his head with the blanket and began to deceive himself like an ostrich. Anne's scream was finally interrupted, but her eyes still looked as if she had seen a ghost. She stared at the messy bed and exclaimed, "You too, in broad daylight, close the door. You're invading my privacy, do you know that?" Tang Jing roared in annoyance. And seemed to have awoken from a dream as she slammed the door shut. She clutched her chest as her heart pounded violently. She was a princess and had lived in the West since she was young, so she definitely had some education in this area. However, this was the first time she had seen a real man's body, so she was naturally quite frightened. However, her nerves were still very tenacious. After a while, she came back to her senses and smacked her lips. "Everyone says that Eastern men can't do it. I don't think they're that bad." Inside the room, Tang Jing carried Marshall out of bed. "Everyone's gone. What are you hiding in there for? It's all your fault. If you woke up earlier, everything would have been fine." Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't over yet. However, he was at a disadvantage. She had actually seen it all. He had suffered a great loss. Since it has already happened, there's no point in running away. It's not like there's anything wrong with it. Moreover, this matter is her fault. She barged into someone's room and didn't respect their privacy at all. Tang Zhang said righteously. Anyway, I'm not going out today. If you want to go out, then go out." Marshall grabbed the blanket to cover his body and said resolutely. "You're not even afraid of going into battle to kill the enemy. What's there to be afraid of?" Tang Jing didn't understand her. "How can that be the same?" Marshall asked. Tang Jing was helpless and said, "All right, if you don't go out, I'll go out. I want to see what she can do to me." Tang Zhang's skin was thick. How could he be scared by a woman to the point that he didn't dare to leave the room? Dressed neatly, he walked out as if nothing had happened. Seeing and staring straight at him, he took the initiative and said, "And, do you know what privacy is? You are seriously invading my privacy." As expected, when she heard the word privacy, Anne immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were at home, and I didn't know you were doing that. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have barged in. This is my fault. I apologize." Her sincere attitude made Tang Jing feel a little embarrassed. Tang Jing resentfully waved his hand and said, "Since it's your first offense, I won't pursue it. Why don't you go to school in the middle of the day and run home? You're still talking about me. Aren't you at home too?" "I don't have class today." Princess Anne rolled her eyes and said, "I don't have class either. You promised to bring me around the capital last time, but you still haven't fulfilled your promise." Tang Jing was shocked. "You've already seen the matter between me and Marshall, why are you still sticking to me to bring you around the capital? When did I promise you?" Tang Jing refused. "Last time I told you about Yi Ding Dang." Hearing the 3 words Yi Ding Dang, Tang Zhang's mood immediately dropped, and said, "I didn't promise you, that's what you said." After saying that, he returned to his room and bid farewell to Marshall. Marshall also wished that he could leave quickly, otherwise, it would be awkward if Anne saw him. Tang Jing brought Xiao by and left amidst Anne's angry denunciations. In the next few days, Tang Jing took the time to treat Marshall's injuries. Those scars finally disappeared and she regained her former beauty. When Anne saw this change, she was so shocked that her chin almost fell to the ground. She understood the international biomedical information very well, especially the treatment of scars. There had never been such an immediate effect. This was simply a miracle in the history of medicine. She kept asking Tang Jing how he did it, but Tang Jing completely ignored her and directly slipped away, causing Anne to stomp her feet in anger. The peaceful days were short-lived. Old Wei's call finally came, informing him that the grave robbers were ready to leave. It was just a group of grave robbers, so Tang Jing did not put them in his eyes, so he left Little White in the imperial city to accompany the five-clawed golden dragon. Marshall also stayed at home to cultivate the fire underworld palm. Ever since he had seen the actual power of the fire underworld palm, he had been training even harder. Driving to the school to pick up Professor Chi, he found that he had prepared a lot of things. It was obvious that he had made sufficient preparations during this period of time. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Professor Chi nodded seriously. Of course there is. This time, we are going to the wild, and we are exploring an ancient tomb. There are only the two of us, and we don't know what kind of unexpected situation we will encounter, so we have to be fully prepared. All right. But there's no need to carry so many bags. I'll keep them for you first. Tang Jing waved his arm and all the luggage disappeared into thin air. Professor Chi was flabbergasted. Although he already knew Tang Jing's identity and knew that he had a lot of divine arts, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this move. The two of them arrived at the place where they had agreed to meet up with Old Wei. Old Wei had been waiting for a long time and quickly came forward to welcome them. Seeing the two of them empty hands, he frowned and said, "Are you going to go empty-handed like this?" "The luggage is with him." Professor Chi pointed at Tang Jing. Old Wei looked at Tang Jing with a strange expression. Tang Jing didn't want to explain and asked first, "Where are the grave robbers?" Chapter 724. 5 or 6 people walked out with big and small bags and got into 2 off-road vehicles. Tang Jing furrowed his brows. Although they were separated by a street, he could still feel the murderous aura from them. There was also a strong yin energy. This meant that not only were their hands stained with blood, but they had also been in a graveyard full of yin energy all year round. That was why they were so stained with yin energy. They really are grave robbers. A cold light flashed in Tang Jing's eyes. He was like a lurking tiger staring at a pack of wolves. Vroom. The off-road vehicle started, and with a graceful swerve of its tail, it sped away, leaving behind a trail of dust. Professor Chi hurriedly urged Tang Jing, "Quick, don't lose them. We can't run away. Sit tight." Tang Jing also started the car. The roar of the engine made people's blood boil. This car was specially prepared for him by Mu Hongyan. It had been carefully modified, and its performance was much better than other cars. "Old Chi, be careful," Old Wei said worriedly. Professor Chi's face was red as if he had a second spring. He waved his hand proudly and said, "Don't worry, wait for my triumphant return. This discovery will definitely shock the world." He was full of confidence, like a fighter. Vroom. Tang Jing started the car and roared away, following the grave robbers from afar. One in front and one behind, the 2 groups of people drove out of the capital and onto the highway. Tang Jing looked at the road signs. These people were heading south. As for their destination, it was unknown. The grave robbers were very vigilant. If not for Tang Jing being careful, he would have been discovered several times. Night fell. The grave robber got off the highway and stopped in front of a small hotel. "What do we do?" Professor Chi asked. Tang Zheng was bold and said, "Let's go to the hotel. They haven't seen us before, so there's no need to be afraid." Professor Chi was eager to try. This was an unprecedented experience. He was so excited that his cheeks were red. He rubbed his hands and said, "We'll have to face the grave robbers in a while." Tang Jing patted his shoulder and said, "Professor Chi, calm down. It's just a few grave robbers." Professor Chi said disapprovingly, "You don't know how much archaeologists hate grave robbers. If we can catch them with the stolen goods and hand them over to the police, it will be a great deed." "Okay, after it's done, we'll hand them over to the police," Tang Jing promised. By the time the two of them got out of the car, the grave robber had already checked in. He watched the other party go upstairs from afar. Professor Chi's eyes were fixed on the back of the grave robber. His eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Cough. Tang Jing coughed lightly and reminded Professor Chi to pay attention because the hotel owner was already paying attention to them. Professor Chi blushed and quickly retracted his gaze. 2 rooms. Tang Jing handed over the money and documents. The boss looked at the two of them deeply, went through the registration procedures with a straight face, and then handed the two of them 2 access cards. There was no need to expect any service from the owner of such a small hotel. Anyway, the two of them didn't care about that. They took the room card and went upstairs. "Which room are they staying in?" Professor Chi asked in a low voice. "The 3rd floor, right next to us. They've booked 3 rooms." Tang Zhang's hearing was excellent. The soundproofing of such a small hotel was not very good. He could already vaguely hear the grave robber's voice. However, the other party deliberately lowered their voices, so he couldn't hear what they were saying. "Sigh, it's such a waste for the two of us to get 2 rooms." Professor Chi looked at the room card in his hand, came back to his senses, and muttered. Tang Jing smiled slightly, but did not explain the reason. The last time he entered the 100,000 Mountains with Professor Chi and the others, he had a deep impression of Professor Chi. He especially liked to snore. It was earth-shattering and made it difficult for people to sleep. He didn't want to endure that kind of destruction again, so he deliberately booked 2 rooms. After they entered their rooms, Tang Zhang was a little tired after driving all the way. He ate a little and went to sleep. In a daze, he was suddenly awakened by a noise, mixed with Professor Chi's exclamation. Tang Jing jumped out of bed like a carp and quickly opened the door, only to see a lot of people crowded in the corridor. They blocked Professor Chi's door and were shouting fiercely. Tang Zhang's heart tightened. Could it be that something happened to Professor Chi? He quickly squeezed through the crowd and shouted, "Make way, make way." Finally, he squeezed through the door, only to see Professor Chi being forced into a corner by a few people. His clothes were messy, and there was a woman sitting on the bed with her hair blown dry. This woman had heavy makeup and an extremely short skirt, revealing 2 white thighs. Seeing this scene, Tang Zhang was stunned. What was going on? "Old man, you look so serious, but your mind is so dirty. Seeing that my sister is beautiful, you want to take advantage of her, right? Let me tell you, if you don't give us an explanation today, don't even think about leaving." A bald man roared fiercely. The bald man was shirtless, and there was a big gold chain around his neck. Coupled with his big pockmarked face, it was obvious that he was a gangster. Tang Zhang was confused. How could Professor Chi have a conflict with this group of people? Moreover, the woman on the bed was too eye-catching. What the hell was going on? But no matter what, he had to save Professor Chi first. Professor Chi was so angry that his face and ears were red. He glared at them and retorted hoarsely, "You're slandering me. It's obvious that you're the ones who controlled the girl to do those dirty things. I want to call the police." I want the police to arrest you. Professor Chi's voice was loud and righteous, but it made the group of people's eyes shine fiercely. They shouted unscrupulously, "Where did this old man come from? You dare to call the police? When the police come, don't even think about pleasing them." When Tang Zheng heard this, his heart suddenly lit up, and he finally guessed that the woman was actually a young lady who came out to sell herself, and Professor Chi was. Impossible, with Tang Zheng's understanding of him, other than being obsessed with archaeology, this old man would not have much interest in women, let alone at his age, he would not be able to do anything, and his taste would not be that low. This was a trap, an immortal's trap. Although Tang Zheng had never really encountered it, he had made many friends with people from all walks of life. He still knew a little about this kind of dirty trick. Perhaps the two of them had been targeted since they entered the hotel. The boss must have been in cahoots with this group of people. When he saw that the two of them were foreigners, he had evil intentions. He must have thought that the old man was easy to fool and chose to target Professor Chi. Tang Zheng's face sank. This group of people was really King shameless. They actually dared to target Professor Chi. This old man had done research all his life and must have valued his reputation very much. Now that he was slandered as a prostitute, it would be worse than death. Tang Zheng did not delay and rushed over with large strides. The few burly men only felt their bodies sway and were pushed aside. The next second, they saw a young man standing in front of the old man. The bald man stared and disdainfully said, "Oh, you actually have an accomplice. So what? This old man bullied my little sister. If he doesn't give an explanation, no one can step out of this door." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear and supported Professor Chi. "Professor Chi, what is going on?" Hearing Tang Zheng call him professor, the bald man became even more arrogant. It was as if he had eaten stimulants. He shouted loudly, "So it's still a professor? A beast with a human face. I think it's more like a beast. If you don't give me an explanation, I'll go to your unit and ask for an explanation." The bald man was an experienced person. He was ecstatic. This time, he had really picked up a treasure. This kind of person was most afraid of people going to his unit to cause trouble. In order to keep the peace, he had to give enough lottery tickets. The bald man's eyes were red. It was as if he could see a sky full of money flying towards him like a fairy scattering flowers. Professor Chi indignantly explained the whole story. It turned out that when he was resting, he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. When he opened the door, he saw a woman with heavy makeup. The other party rushed into his room without saying anything and tried to sell him her services. Although Professor Chi was obsessed with research, he still knew that the other party was a woman who had lost her virginity. Although this group of people often appeared in the news, it was the first time he had seen it. It was very fresh. Of course, he definitely did not have any improper thoughts. He just felt that the other party was very pitiful, so he tried his best to persuade her to take the right path. He even promised to find a job for her when he returned to Beijing. He never thought that his love would harm himself. The door was pushed open with a bang, and then a group of people surrounded him fiercely. They insisted that Professor Chi was an old man who did not respect himself and bullied a woman. Professor Chi was a scholar who met a soldier. He could not explain himself clearly and was unable to defend himself. He was said to be useless by the other party. His part-time job was to call a beast with a human face but a beast's heart. Seeing Tang Zheng, Professor Chi's heart finally returned to his stomach. He grabbed Tang Zheng's hand and explained, "Don't believe their words. I'm really wronged." Tang Zheng smiled coldly and glanced at the people opposite him. "Of course I know you're wronged. This group of people came with ill intentions. They're obviously here to extort money. Professor Chi, you've been fooled." Professor Chi's face was bitter. Although he was a titan in the archaeological world, he was helpless in the face of these things. He said dejectedly, "Then what should we do?" "Pay up. You have to pay up." The bald man shouted first. "Professor Chi, sit on the chair and rest. I'll take care of it." Tang Jing comforted him. He turned his eyes and saw a few familiar faces at the door. It was the group of grave robbers. One of the grave robbers pointed at the dejected Professor Chi and whispered to him. Tang Zhang's heart trembled as he had a bad premonition. As expected, the grave robber looked at Tang Jing and Professor Chi warily, then turned around and left. "I've been exposed." Although Tang Jing did not know how the other party found out, he was still exposed. This matter was troublesome. However, he did not have time to chase after them. He was stopped by the bald man and a group of people. Each of them was like a pack of wolves, staring at Tang Jing with glowing eyes. "Want to escape? No way. Close the door." Chapter 725. The group of people glared at Tang Jing and Professor Chi as if they were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They wanted to say a few words to keep up appearances, but Tang Jing did not give them a chance. Like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, he rushed into the crowd with a whoosh. With a raise of his hand and a fall of his fist, one by one, they immediately turned into pig heads. Tang Jing pulled Professor Chi up and shouted, "Let's go." The two of them swaggered out of the room, leaving only a mess in the room and the woman who was sitting on the bed dumbfounded. Where are they? However, when the two of them came downstairs, they found that the grave robber's car was gone. Without a doubt, the other party must have noticed something and slipped away without stopping. Professor Chi was dumbfounded. It was as if a basin of ice water had been poured over his head. His enthusiasm turned to nothing. He stomped his feet in hatred and said regretfully, "It's all my fault. Why should I be so kind? Now that the person and the car are gone, how am I supposed to follow them?" Tang Zhang's face was sullen as he looked around. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at a sneaky person in the distance. He strode over. The other party immediately wanted to hide behind the counter, but in the end, Tang Jing dragged him out. "Boss, you were the one who led the people upstairs, right?" Tang Jing asked with a fake smile. 8 less than or equal to the boss was so scared that he trembled. He had secretly run upstairs to take a look. When he saw the defeated soldiers wailing on the ground, his blood almost froze. He knew that this time, he had kicked an iron plate. The other party was not a harmless lamb, but a fierce dragon crossing the river. He had been running this hotel for quite some time. He served people according to their needs and occasionally used unskilled methods like badger jumping to extort tourists. It was a tried and tested method. He did not expect to fail miserably this time. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." The boss pretended to be confused and shook his head. Slap. Half of the boss's face immediately swelled up. Seeing that Tang Jing was about to slap him again, the boss was so scared that he shouted, I'll tell you everything. It's my fault this time. I shouldn't have hurt you. I'm a bastard." Tang Jing hurriedly stopped his endless nonsense and asked straightforwardly, "Where did that group of people go?" The boss shrunk his neck and stuttered. Tang Jing glared at him. The man was so scared that he spilled the beans. "They went west." "West?" Tang Jing looked at the dark road ahead. There were many cars on it. Looking for the 3 cars in the dark was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Professor Chi was filled with regret and hatred. He looked into the distance, his lips twitching. Tang Jing also frowned. Without a direction, this group of people would completely lose track of them. How would they find the ancient tomb then? Seeing that Tang Jing was silent, the boss was afraid that he would vent his anger on him, so he reminded him, "So you're looking for those people. They're not easy to deal with." "Ha! Tang Jing moved his head and asked, "Do you know them?" "No, I don't." The boss hurriedly shook his head. "But they used to live here. I can tell they're not easy to deal with. Also, they have a smell on them." "Smell? What smell?" Tang Jing asked curiously. The boss stuck out his tongue and said in surprise, "The smell of death." "Ha!" Tang Jing was suddenly curious. He could see that the yin energy on those people was very strong, but he did not smell the smell of death. Seeing that Tang Jing was very interested, the boss wanted to make up for his mistake and said, "People in that line of work all have that smell. Normal people can't smell it, but I've been here for so many years. I've met who knows how many groups of people like this. I've long known them." "Oh, what do you think they do?" "Excavators." The boss smiled slyly. Tombstone was also a tomb robber. This boss really had some experience. "Then do you know where they went?" "If you can tell me, then I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair." "Yes." The boss was convinced. "I'll tell you. They went to Qinling." "Qinling?" "Yes, there are many ancient tombs there. It's simply a paradise for these people. Who knows how many people go there every year. Moreover, many people have poured out treasures from there." Professor Chi's eyes lit up when he heard the two words Qinling. He slapped his head and said, "Why didn't we think that they went in that direction? It must be Qinling. Since they said there's a huge ancient tomb, then Qinling fits the description." Tang Jing knew little about this. Seeing that Professor Chi was so certain, he believed him. He asked the boss with a cold face, "Qinling is so big. Do you know where they went?" The boss said with a bitter face, "How would I know? If I had the ability, I'd be excavating too." "You still want to excavate?" Tang Jing was furious. The boss knew that things were not going well. He cried out in panic, "I don't dare, I don't dare." He paused for a moment, then added, "But recently, there have been a few groups of people going there. In the past, there weren't so many people at this time. They must have found something. You'll definitely find some clues if you go there." Tang Zhang and Professor Chi looked at each other. Professor Chi nodded, apparently agreeing with this person's point of view. Seeing this, the boss looked at Tang Jing expectantly. Tang Jing threw him to the ground and fiercely said, "I'm warning you, if you dare to do this kind of thing in the future, your end will be your end." As soon as he finished speaking, the boss saw a ray of light shoot up into the sky and land on top of the hotel. Then, everything returned to normal. He saw the two people get into a car and drive away. The boss patted his chest with lingering fear and spat. He curled his lips and said, "You're scaring me. Do you think I'm scared? You're a dragon crossing the river, but there are always small shrimps. If I don't trick them, they'll have nothing to eat." The last word turned into a scream, but it was quickly drowned out by a loud rumbling sound. The scream came to an abrupt end. He stared with a pair of dead fish eyes at everything in front of him. His mind was blank, and his whole body was trembling. It was as if there were countless swords hanging over his head. The hotel collapsed. It was a mess. The group of big men were crying and screaming as they struggled to climb out of the ruins. Since they had a destination, Tang Zheng and Professor Chi were not in a hurry. In order to save time, the two did not look for another hotel to stay. Instead, they drove straight to Qinling. Qinling was a huge mountain range that stretched from east to west in the middle of Huaxia. It was like a huge dragon lying on the earth of Huaxia. It was also known as the Dragon Vein of Huaxia civilization. Along the way, Professor Chi tirelessly filled Tang Jing in on the knowledge of the Qinling Mountains. There had always been many ancient and great tombs in Qinling. However, due to the restrictions of the terrain, the mountains were too steep. There were also many unknown ancient tombs buried here. This caused the tomb robbers to run rampant. They even used gunpowder to open the mountains and blow up the tombs, destroying countless cultural relics. Professor Chi sighed and said hatefully, "If we catch all these tomb robbers, it will definitely be a great merit for the inheritance of Huaxia culture." Tang Jing did not comment. This was a whimsical idea. Human nature sought benefits and avoided harm. If there was profit, there would definitely be people who lost their humanity and took risks. After more than a day of trekking, the undulating mountains gradually appeared in their sight. This mountain range was not as dangerous as Mount Hua, but it had another kind of charm. The undulating mountains were more shocking than the hundreds of thousands of mountains in southern Yunnan. Professor Chi got out of the car, put his hands on his waist, and pointed at the mountains in the distance. He said, "Look, this is the dragon vein of Huaxia. It's so beautiful." "Professor Chi, is there any basis for the dragon vein?" Tang Jing asked on a whim. "This is a ruling method of the ancient kings. They deliberately increased the mystery of Qinling. How can there be dragons in this world?" "Of course, there is no dragon vein," Professor Chi said firmly. "Dragon." Tang Jing immediately saw the flaw in Professor Chi's words. There were dragons in this world, so the dragon vein might not be a groundless rumor. What exactly was a dragon vein? Tang Jing could not help but have this question in his mind. But in the end, no one could answer this question. Close to Qinling, there were many more villages, hotels, and restaurants. There were obviously more people. In recent years, the tourism industry had developed, and many explorers had come to conquer this mysterious mountain range. Tang Jing and Professor Chi decided to find a place to stay for the night and recharge their energy, especially Professor Chi. After all, he was old. After such a long journey, although he was still very excited on the surface, it was difficult to hide the deep fatigue between his brows. Moreover, he could also use the rest time to inquire about the whereabouts of the grave robbers. The two chose a hotel that seemed to be more reliable to stay in. After eating at the restaurant next door, Tang Jing left Professor Chi to rest in the room and walked out. However, this time, just in case, the two of them only booked a standard room. Tang Jing could only endure Professor Chi's snoring for the time being. Strolling through the village, Tang Jing saw that there were quite a few foreigners. The inns and restaurants were filled with quite a few foreigners. Some of them were clearly backpackers, while others made Tang Jing frown. These people were more or less tainted with some yin energy. Although they were dressed as backpackers, how could they escape Tang Jing's sharp eyes? He walked around the village vigilantly, but he did not find the group of grave robbers. However, he saw a few other groups of grave robbers. This was really a paradise for grave robbers, a disaster area for Huaxia civilization. After a night of silence, Tang Jing endured Professor Chi's bombardment. Professor Chi once again regained his vigor and kept urging Tang Jing to quickly enter the mountain. Since the group of grave robbers was not in the village, then they must be impatient to enter the mountain. If the grave robbers had arrived a step earlier, who knew how many cultural relics would have been destroyed? Chapter 726. The Qinling Mountains were not as steep as the Huashan Mountains, but they were continuous and lush. It was easy for people to lose their way. In this vast mountain, once one lost their way, it was not an exaggeration to say that they would eventually be trapped to death. The two of them had been on the road for half a day. The road under their feet changed from a main road to a winding path. In the end, there was no way to go. There were thorns and vines in front of them. If Professor Chi came alone, he would have been unable to move an inch. However, with Tang Jing, everything became easier. The war soul sword was overkill. With one strike, the thorns and vines were defeated. The two of them easily shuttled through the vast mountain. They were much faster than the average person. Bang! Suddenly, a clear gunshot echoed in the mountain forest. It was particularly ear-piercing. Professor Chi shrunk his head and was shocked. He exclaimed in a low voice, "There are enemies." Tang Zheng looked up as if nothing had happened. In the distance, he saw a figure flashing in the dense forest. The gunshots did not stop. They came sporadically, making people nervous. Grave robbers. Professor Chi also looked around. He smacked his lips and asked. Most likely. These people are really desperate. They even prepared guns. Tang Zheng sighed. Arrogant. Professor Chi scolded fiercely. Let's go. Anyway, we haven't found any clues. Since we met grave robbers, let's follow the clues and see if we can find them. Tang Zheng suggested. Professor Chi did not disagree. He said, later, you will make a move and teach these criminals a lesson. Tang Zheng smiled and ignored Professor Chi's scholarly attitude. After a while, the two of them passed through the layers of obstacles and approached their destination. The gunshots had stopped. Tang Zheng and Professor Chi hid in the bushes. Not far from them was a group of fierce desperados. Many of them had guns in their hands. Some of them had machetes and other weapons. There were several corpses lying on the ground. The leader of the group, a scar-faced man, kicked the people on the ground, spat and cursed, "You bunch of shrimp soldiers and crab generals dare to touch that ancient tomb. Humph, you are courting death. I will send you to see the king of hell first." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and swung the knife down, leaving a bloody wound on the other party's neck. That person twitched a few times before he died. Professor Chi was so scared that he exclaimed in a low voice. He knew that something was wrong and quickly covered his mouth. However, it was too late. The enemy had already found out. The scar-faced man shouted, "Who is it?" His subordinates had already taken action and arrived in front of the bushes with their guns pointed at the two of them. "Boss, we caught two people. Stand up and don't move. If you dare to move, I'll shoot you to death," the grave robber roared fiercely. Tang Zheng cast a comforting look at the frightened Professor Chi. The two of them slowly stood up. The scar-faced man walked over and stared fiercely at the two of them. His small eyes rolled around, and the machete in his hand was pointed at the two of them. He asked, "Who are you?" "I." Professor Chi wanted to speak, but he was interrupted by Tang Zheng. "We are tourists. We heard that the scenery in Qinling Mountain is beautiful, so we came to take a look." Tang Zheng had already carefully scanned this group of people. He did not find the grave robbers he was looking for. This meant that they were not in the same group. However, the ancient tomb that the scar-faced man had mentioned had aroused Tang Zheng's interest. Could it be that this group of grave robbers had also come for that ancient tomb? He was going to wait and see. He wanted to get some information from the other party. Seeing that Tang Zheng was dignified and neither servile nor overbearing, the scar-faced man laughed fiercely. "Boy, don't think that I am a fool. You want to fool us with such a clumsy lie. Humph, you are daydreaming." Tang Zheng did not care. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Oh, then what are you going to do?" "What am I going to do?" "Humph, you saw what we did just now. Of course, I am going to send you to see the king of hell," the scar-faced man said murderously. Tang Zheng was unmoved. He said, "I have seen the king of hell a long time ago. I don't want to see him today." When he fought with the king of hell in the ghost realm, he was no stranger to him. When the others heard this, they laughed sarcastically. "This boy is scared silly. Boss, just kill him. We still have business to do." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear to them and asked, "Where is the ancient tomb that you are talking about?" F***CK, I am the one asking you. You dare to ask me? Damn, are you not afraid of death? Then I will fulfill your wish. The scar-faced man waved his machete. Tang Jing frowned. This group of people was not cooperating. It seemed that they were going to use force. Bang, bang, bang. However, a series of fierce gunshots interrupted his thoughts. The scar-faced man was shot between his eyebrows. Blood flowed out. His eyes were wide open as he fell to the ground with grievances. The others were beaten up by this sudden attack. However, in the end, they could not escape the scythe of death. They fell to the ground one after another. On the contrary, Tang Zhang and Professor Qi stood in place unscathed. Tang Zhang's expression was calm. Professor Qi looked at so many dead people. He was already pale with fright. Professor Qi, I am here. Don't be afraid. Tang Jing comforted him softly. Professor Qi heard this and his trembling body slightly stopped. Who is it this time? Professor Qi asked with trepidation. They will know when they come out. Tang Zhang said indifferently. In this kind of rain of bullets, it was not difficult for him to escape. However, he did not want to reveal his strength immediately. Moreover, this group of people who suddenly attacked were stronger. He wanted to see who they were. Rustling footsteps sounded in the woods. More than 10 people walked out. Tang Zhang's pupils suddenly shrank. He was secretly delighted. His target had appeared. He found the few grave robbers he had been following in the crowd. However, these people were obviously not the leader. One of them, an old man in his 50s with a goatee, caught Tang Zhang's attention. This was because he was too different from the others. Everyone else had a strong yin qi, but he was no different from an ordinary person. There was no yin qi around him at all. However, the occasional fierce light in his eyes still made Tang Jing judge that this person was not an ordinary person. As the saying goes, a dog that bites does not bark. This old man was the dog that bites. He was much more powerful than the other people who looked fierce. This person seems to be the leader of the grave robbers. However, there is no yin qi on him. How can a person who has been drilling into graves for many years not be surrounded by yin qi? Could this old man have a way to resolve it? It was extremely unusual to be able to resolve the yin qi. Tang Jing stopped underestimating him. The grave robbers surrounded them. More than 10 guns were aimed at the two of them. One of the grave robbers whispered a few words in the old man's ear. The old man looked surprised. His gaze went past Tang Jing and circled around Professor Qi. Tang Jing looked at him curiously. The person who whispered to the others in the inn was also the grave robber just now. Could it be that he had found some clues? The old man walked over and looked at Professor Qi with burning eyes. The famous Professor Qi Shaoan has graced us with your presence. What a surprise! Ah! Professor Qi let out a cry of surprise. The other party had actually seen through his identity. This was too unexpected. Tang Zheng suddenly understood. No wonder the grave robbers in the inn had escaped. It turned out that one of them had seen through Professor Qi's identity. Professor Qi was a titan in the archaeological world. It was not strange that the grave robbers could recognize him. Because of Professor Qi's prominent identity, the grave robbers must have thought that he was an official. They thought that the police had targeted them, so they ran away without stopping. Seeing Professor Qi so surprised, the old man looked around and shouted, "Police friends, you want to catch me, Wu Lao Er? Then please show yourself. How can you hide so sneakily?" There was no response from the dense forest. Wu Lao Er frowned and said, "Could it be that you are showing yourself because there is going to be blood? Professor Qi is a titan in the ancient examination world. If anything happens to him, you will not be able to bear the consequences." There was still no response. Professor Qi shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? Where did the police come from? Wu Lao Air stroked his goatee. His eyes flashed as he said, "So you are saying that you are acting alone?" "How am I acting alone? There are two of us," Professor Qi said angrily. Wu Lao Air glanced at Tang Jing and said, "Is bringing a student that useful?" It was clear that he thought that Tang Jing was an ordinary student. In fact, when Tang Jing was quiet, he really had a scholarly aura. It was not surprising that Wu Lao Air misjudged him. Professor Qi said with a red face, "What's wrong with two people? Facing a group of grave robbers like you, two people are enough." Ha ha ha, the group of people laughed without restraint. They looked at Professor Qi as if they were looking at an idiot. Tang Zhang had been watching coldly from the side. This Wu Lao Air was not simple. He was waiting to catch this group of people in one fell swoop and then ask about the whereabouts of the ancient tomb. "Professor Qi, you have followed us all the way. You must have heard the news, right? Hee, you've come just in time. This time, even the heavens are helping me. Last time, I wasn't able to enter the center of the ancient tomb. This time, with you and our ample preparations, we will definitely succeed." Second Elder Wu changed the topic and said mysteriously, "What do you mean?" Professor Qi asked righteously. "Of course it's to pull you in. Professor Qi, with your knowledge, after the matter is done, I will give you 10% of the profits. How about it? This is much more money than doing research." Wu Lao Air said temptingly. Professor Qi flew into a rage. This was simply a humiliation to him. He did research to pass down Chinese culture. How was it for money? This group of people was tarnishing his character. He was about to scold them when Tang Jing grabbed his hand and said, "Professor Qi, 10% of the profits is not a small amount. Aren't we lacking research funds? Won't this solve our problem?" As he said this, he secretly winked at Professor Qi. "Ha, your student is a smart person. A wise man submits to circumstances. In this society, who can't live with money?" Wu Lao Air said with praise. Professor Qi was not an idiot. After seeing this, he immediately understood that Tang Jing wanted to pretend to join them and then follow them into the ancient tomb. Professor Qi was not a pedantic person. Moreover, with Tang Jing accompanying him, he was not afraid. He took a deep breath and said as if he had no choice, "All right, but 10% is not enough. 20%. Chapter 727. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The two opposing parties had become allies, but neither of them had good intentions. They were just using each other. With the addition of the tomb robbers, Tang Zhang and Wu Qi moved faster. They were no longer running around like headless flies. Wu Lao explained the current situation to the two of them. It was unknown whether he was being kind or not. In the circle of robbers, this ancient tomb was no longer a secret. Of course, ordinary thieves did not know about it, but those with a little power knew about it. Therefore, for the sake of the wealth, many powers gathered in the Qinling Mountains. In order to monopolize the wealth, the killing had already begun. A few weaker groups of tomb robbers had already been eliminated. The big fish ate the small fish, and the small fish ate the shrimps. The law of the jungle played out incisively and vividly here. Wu Lao Air's group was relatively lucky. Last time, they only entered the periphery of the ancient tomb and found a few scattered spoils of war. However, from these spoils of war, they could already determine how much wealth the true core of the ancient tomb contained. Men died for wealth, and birds died for food. This group of desperados did not hesitate to take risks for the sake of this treasure. As long as they succeeded, they could live a carefree life for the rest of their lives. After this deal, they would not have to worry about their lower body. Not many people could resist this kind of temptation. Professor Qi's eyebrows danced as he listened. If there was really such a huge ancient tomb, then the research value would be huge. Perhaps he could really get what he wanted and discover something shocking that could overturn history. Wu Lao Er was very excited. He said, "Professor Chi, you have been doing research for so many years, but you haven't done any robbers, right?" "Humph, we studied ancient tombs for work." "Unlike you," Professor Chi said disdainfully. "Isn't it the same now? Whether it's work or robbers, it's all for money. Money is the #1 driving force." Wu Lao Er laughed. Unknowingly, the group had already arrived in the depths of the Qinling Mountains. There were no signs of human habitation around. Occasionally, there would be wild beasts, but this group of people had guns and ammunition. Ordinary wild beasts could not do anything to them. Professor Chi looked around and asked curiously, "What is that ancient tomb like?" Wu Lao Er's expression became serious when he mentioned the ancient tomb. He said, "I've been robbing for most of my life, but I've never seen such an ancient tomb." "Oh. What is it like?" Professor Chi asked. Wu Lao closed his eyes as if he was reminiscing. After a while, he said, "I didn't see the whole picture of the ancient tomb. Just the tip of the iceberg shocked me. It was unheard of and unseen. It was a miracle in human history." After hearing this, Professor Chi and Tang Zhang looked at each other with joy in their eyes. It was the right decision to come here. Professor Chi impatiently urged, "Can you describe it in detail?" Wu Lao smiled bitterly. "I can't find the right words. Words can't describe or express it." Professor Chi and Tang Zhang were more convinced when they saw that the other party was serious and did not seem to be lying. They looked forward to seeing the true appearance of the ancient tomb. "Was this tomb recently discovered?" Professor Chi asked. He knew that many ancient tombs had been discovered by grave robbers a long time ago. However, due to the conditions at that time, they couldn't enter the ancient tombs. They had to wait for the right time to enter the ancient tombs. Therefore, Professor Chi wanted to know the ins and outs of this ancient tomb. Of course, it's newly discovered. In fact, it's a coincidence. In the past, this area was trampled flat by our brothers. Many ancient tombs, big and small, were found, but no one has ever found such a large ancient tomb. Seeing Wu Lao's excited expression, Professor Chi quickly asked, "How did you find it this time?" "Oh, someone accidentally found a treasure, so they opened this ancient tomb," Wu Lao said mysteriously. "What treasure?" "I don't know the details. Anyway, when that group of people was fighting in Dianan, they accidentally found a natural phenomenon. A ray of light crossed the sky, and then they followed it and found a treasure. This ancient tomb was drawn out by that treasure." Wu Lao sighed. "Why didn't I have such good luck? If I had discovered this kind of secret, I definitely wouldn't have leaked the news." That group of people didn't have a tight mouth and leaked the news, so everyone naturally swarmed over. Everyone wanted to take a bite and share a piece of the pie. Professor Chi glanced at Tang Jing. The two of them had a strange look on their faces. The matter of southern Yunnan and the natural phenomenon caused them to have endless imagination. There were too many secrets and miracles hidden in southern Yunnan. Could it be that the treasure that the group of grave robbers found came from the 100,000 mountains? Tang Zheng had once heard from the heaven monk that back then in the 10,000 huge mountains, after he fainted, the 100 transformation star lord broke through the restrictions of the Buzhou mountain, and the restrictions of the prehistoric heavenly tomb also collapsed. Countless magic treasures and even living beings turned into rays of light that filled the sky and rushed in all directions, disappearing without a trace. Could it be? The treasure that the grave robber found was one of them. He felt more and more that this was a possibility. This group of grave robbers was really lucky. He just didn't know what the treasure was, but it actually led to this ancient tomb. Immediately, Tang Zheng became more and more expectant. Everything that was related to the 100,000 mountains was not simple. He had come here by chance, so of course he had to investigate it. After climbing over the mountains, they walked further and further away. Finally, they arrived at the foot of a towering mountain and stopped. Tang Zhang raised his head and looked around. This mountain peak was thousands of meters above sea level, and was obviously taller than the other mountains. Moreover, this was the eastern section of the Qinling Mountains, and if one looked from the mountain peak, they could overlook the vast North China Plain. "Have we arrived?" Professor Qi asked. Second brother Wu nodded solemnly and ordered his subordinates to start preparing. They brought a lot of equipment, big and small bags, and Tang Jing saw that there were explosives among them. Obviously, if they encountered any obstacles, they were prepared to explode violently. They were simply insane. After tidying up his equipment, second brother Wu gave the order and set off again. This time, he clearly saw traces of people walking past. There were many broken thorny branches on both sides. Second brother Wu looked around and said coldly, "Someone beat us to it." "What are you afraid of?" "The ancient tomb is so big, and there are so many obstacles. It's useless even if you beat us to it," the others said indifferently. Second brother Wu nodded and did not forget to remind them, "There are so many dangers in there. Keep your eyes open. Be alert. Let's eat and drink well." The crowd was in high spirits, and they rushed to the foot of the mountain. Looking at this group of greedy people, Tang Zhang's eyes flashed with a cold light. "You are happy now, but you will cry later." Although Tang Zhang was a newcomer in the archaeology field, after all, he was also a person who walked in the 100,000 Mountains, a forbidden area for archaeologists and even tomb robbers. He knew that this kind of large ancient tomb seemed to be attractive, but in fact, it was full of dangers. If he was not careful, he would lose his life here. Professor Qi and Tang Zhang were escorted in the middle of the team. Wu Laosen took the lead and removed the disguise of a pile of thorny branches. A hole appeared in front of them. The hole was not big, and it was only big enough for one person to pass through. It was like a crack formed by a crack in the mountain. It was so dark that they could not see where it led to. A gust of cold air floated out of the hole. Even if it was a hot summer day, it still made people feel a biting cold. "Go in, pay attention to the surrounding environment," second brother Wu ordered seriously. When Professor Qi walked past him, he grabbed his arm and warned him coldly, "Professor Qi, when you go in, you are only one step away from the King of Hell's palace. Don't play tricks, or you will really have to report to the King of Hell's palace." Professor Qi did not say anything. He shook off his hand and entered the hole with Tang Zhang. The tomb robber's wolf-eye flashlight illuminated the inside of the cave. There were no obvious traces of excavation on the mountain wall. Instead, it seemed to be torn apart by a huge force to form this cave. Torn apart. Tang Jing felt a chill in his heart. How much power did this require? This was a whole mountain. How could it be torn apart? He could not figure out the reason for this at the moment. He just thought that he was thinking too much. Although the cave was cold, it was well ventilated. There was no difficulty in breathing. The surroundings were dead silent. Only the sound of messy footsteps could be heard. In such a claustrophobic environment, if one's nerves were not strong enough, they would be scared silly. Fortunately, this group of people were not ordinary people. Other than Tang Jing, it was not the first time that the others entered the ancient tomb. They were familiar with it and moved forward carefully. The road ahead seemed to have no end. They did not know how long they had walked, but they still did not stop. Tang Jing muttered in his heart, he had already walked for more than 1,000 meters, he should have already reached the middle of the mountain. The cave was winding upwards bit by bit, not towards the ground. Could it be that the ancient tomb was in the middle of the mountain? Suddenly, a ray of light in front of them attracted Tang Jing. He quickly looked up and his vision gradually widened. "We're here." Someone in the crowd cheered in a low voice. Everyone was excited and quickened their pace. In the blink of an eye, they had reached the end of the cave. However, there was a sudden scream in front of them. Then, screams filled the cave. "Run! Run!" The person in front pushed back fiercely. This group of people was immediately pushed back. Some people were even trampled under their feet. There was no time to suddenly change direction. It would only cause a serious trample. Tang Zhang's eyes trembled. He quickly pulled Professor Qi and protected him behind him. He pushed his palm forward and pressed it against the back of the person in front of him, preventing him from retreating. "What are you doing? You're not allowed to retreat. Get the hell back." Wu Lao brought up the rear and walked at the back of the group. When he saw the strange movement in front of him, he hurriedly scolded loudly. His voice finally made people relax slightly. However, panic still lingered in their hearts. They had been here the last time and did not encounter any danger. How could there be danger this time? What danger was it? A brother died. A loud shout came from the front. Chapter 728. Under second brother Wu's rage, the commotion in front finally calmed down a little. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind above his head. Tang Jing subconsciously looked up and saw that old Wu was actually climbing over everyone's heads with his two limbs. His speed was extremely fast. When second brother Wu climbed to the front was completely quiet. Only a few muffled bangs could be heard, and second brother Wu's voice was heard. "All of you, come over here." Everyone rustled out of the cave, and their eyes lit up. The few corpses on the ground were very eye-catching. They were all stabbed with arrows, and blood flowed all over the ground. Everyone's expression was a little unsightly. Dying before the start of the expedition was not a good sign. "Damn it, we didn't see the mechanism last time we came. Why is there a mechanism this time?" Second brother Wu fiercely spat and cursed. Everyone else was silent. How could they know the reason? The people walking in front could not help but recall the scene they had just seen. One arrow after another shot out from the holes in the opposite wall. It was impossible for flesh and blood to block it. Tang Jing also clicked his tongue in wonder. The ancient people's mechanism had been baptized for so long, but it could still be triggered. He also subconsciously looked at the opposite side. Suddenly, his mind was greatly shaken. His pupils were filled with a huge object. Immediately, he was dumbfounded and his jaw almost fell to the ground. Professor Qi's reaction was even stronger than his. He directly screamed and rushed over without caring about his own safety. The others were attracted by the reactions of these two people. The crowd sneered, but they did not remember that their reactions were almost the same when they first saw this scene. Why was there such a big reaction? It was because they saw the true appearance of the ancient tomb. Looking up, the ancient tomb made of blue bricks could not be seen at a glance. It was as if it towered into the clouds. The top of the tomb could not be seen clearly. Moreover, as far as the eye could see, there was no end to it. This ancient tomb seemed to be boundless, as vast as the sea and as majestic as the mountains. How could there be such a strange ancient tomb in the mountains of Qinling? How did the people in the past build it? Question marks came one after another, drilling into Tang Zhang's mind one after another, making him unable to find an answer. Professor Qi was already lying on top of the ancient tomb. He wished he could grow 1,000 pairs of hands and touch every inch of the ancient tomb. The blue brick seemed to make his heart beat faster than a woman's skin. The grave robber sneered at Professor Qi and said, "Professors are indeed stupid. It's not worth anything. What's there to touch? It's not like it's a woman." Second brother Wu's face was livid. He pulled Professor Qi aside and said, "What are you talking about? Hurry up and find a way to enter the tomb." In fact, this was only the periphery of the tomb. One had to break through the bricks to truly enter the tomb. Professor Chi slowly came back to his senses. His eyes became serious and dignified as he asked, "Where did you steal the bronze mask from?" "Bronze mask?" Wu Lao was stunned for a moment before he sneered and said, "So it was because of this that you were lured all the way here from the capital." After pausing for a moment, second brother Wu pointed at the surrounding walls and said, "Look, it's the pit on the wall. Do you see it? The mask is embedded in it." I was almost scared to death at first glance. Tang Zhang and Professor Chi followed his finger and looked over. Sure enough, there were many pits on the surrounding walls. The size of the pits matched the bronze mask. Tang Zhang's face sank and asked, "There are so many pits. There must be a lot of bronze masks. Where are the others?" Second brother Wu spread out his hands and said, "How would I know? They must have been sold. There were a lot of people who came in. Although they didn't enter the tomb, they looted all the good things here. What a sin!" Professor Chi cried out loudly. He wanted to hit the ground with his head. The grave robbers' behavior was heartbreaking. If they didn't destroy the bronze masks, they would definitely be able to research a lot of new things. Tang Jing felt a little regretful. If there were so many masks, he could absorb more spiritual energy to increase his cultivation. Second brother Wu's face turned red and he said angrily, "Professor Chi, don't blame me for being rude if you continue to be noisy." Professor Chi snorted and glared fiercely at Wu Lao. It was as if he was looking at a mortal enemy. Second brother Wu pretended not to see and said, "Think of a way to enter the tomb." "What about the tomb door?" Professor Chi asked. Second brother Wu shook his head, "It's useless. The tomb door is a 10,000-pound boulder. I've never seen such a huge boulder. It's impossible to push it open with human strength." Professor Chi curled his lips and said disdainfully, "How did the ancients succeed?" "Humph, it's not that human strength can't do it. It's just that some people are too stupid." Second brother Wu was insulted and glared angrily. However, he forced himself not to flare up. He still had to rely on Professor Chi. Tang Jing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sometimes, Professor Chi was stubborn to the point of being cute. Facing this group of fiendish grave robbers, he was like a warrior. "Lead the way to the tomb door," Professor Chi said unquestionably. Second brother Wu was helpless and could only lead the two of them along the tomb for a long distance before finally arriving at the tomb door. The tomb door was about 10 meters tall, and it was really a solid stone door. It was unknown how the ancient people built such a giant, but compared to this miraculous ancient tomb, this tomb door was nothing. Second brother Wu looked up at the tomb door and smacked his lips, "We can't enter from here. We brought enough gunpowder so we can definitely blow open the tomb." "Scram to the side." Professor Chi's temper flared up. He completely ignored the other party and began to fumble around the tomb door. Second brother Wu was about to explode. He gritted his teeth and said, "Professor Chi, I'll give you 10 minutes. If you can't do anything, whether you agree or not, I can only blow it up." Professor Chi snorted and didn't comment. He continued to work as he pleased. When Tang Jing saw this, he also went over and touched it. It was cold to the touch as if he was touching ice. This wasn't because of the special material of the bricks but because this place had accumulated too much yin qi over the years. Seeing Professor Chi so serious and persistent, Tang Jing didn't want to disturb him. Thus, Tang Jing began to study the tomb door again. He placed his hands on it and silently circulated his energy. Whoosh! He took a deep breath and released his true qi, but the tomb door didn't move. Ha! Tang Zhang was secretly speechless. This really wasn't something that could be done by human strength. Time passed minute by minute. The tomb robbers were like ants on a hot pan. They walked in circles and looked at Professor Chi with burning eyes. Boom! Suddenly, there was a loud sound. The huge echo reverberated in the enclosed space. It was deafening and almost made people fall to the ground. "What's wrong?" the tomb robbers shouted in panic. Professor Chi roared angrily, "Didn't I forbid you to use explosives?" Second brother Wu said with grievance, "It's not us." "Who else?" Wu Lao Er shook his head and said, "We don't know how many people are still inside." His face became tense as he said this, "We don't know how many people have already entered. We can't wait any longer. We have to blast open a hole and rush in. Otherwise, if we are too late, not even dregs will be left." The others agreed. They didn't pay attention to Professor Chi at all. They were busy preparing to set up the explosives. Professor Chi was so angry that his face turned red. He almost stomped his feet. "A bunch of idiots, idiots." His lips kept trembling, but his hands didn't stop moving. Suddenly, his face turned cold. His hands stopped and he pushed the bricks one by one. It was as if he didn't have a pattern. He casually pushed a brick. After a while, his hands had pushed no less than 10 bricks. Tang Zhang was slightly surprised. He didn't find any clues. Could it be that Professor Chi found something? Second brother Wu also stared at Professor Chi. He saw Professor Chi press the last brick. Click, click, click. The sound of gears turning clearly came from the ancient tomb. All the tomb robbers subconsciously stopped what they were doing. Second brother Wu's face was filled with ecstasy. He was so smart. It was so useful to bring Professor Chi along. He was much better than a tomb robber like himself. Professor Chi turned his head and glanced at the tomb robbers with disdain. "What do you mean by human strength? What is this?" As soon as he finished speaking, the huge tomb door actually rose bit by bit. This was definitely a slap in the face. The tomb robbers' faces turned red. They couldn't refute it at all. At this moment, Professor Chi was simply shining. He was the absolute focus of the crowd. Tang Zhang took a deep breath. He couldn't help but silently praise Professor Chi. Even he couldn't find any clues, but Professor Chi found the pattern and easily broke through the tomb door. This required a huge amount of knowledge and enough intelligence to do it. He couldn't help but admire Professor Chi for this. The title of Professor Chi wasn't fishing for fame. He deserved it. The tomb door slowly rose. Everyone was so excited that they couldn't control themselves. They rubbed their fists and wanted to rush in. Second brother Wu hurriedly scolded, "Do you want to die? Have you forgotten the rules?" Everyone was silent. They remembered their companions who had died tragically. This wasn't an ordinary ancient tomb. It was an ancient tomb filled with danger. They hurriedly retreated. A gust of cold wind swept out from the tomb door, causing their teeth to chatter. Such a strong yin qi. Tang Zhang was secretly speechless. This was more serious than he had expected. If a place had too much yin qi, it was definitely not a good thing. Back then, ordinary balance's ominous land had too much yin qi and evil spirits frequently appeared. This was originally an ancient tomb. Would there be those dirty things? However, he was still bold. He thought to himself that even if there were those things, he could still deal with them. As for these grave robbers, humph, they had only themselves to blame for seeking their own deaths. He did not have the leisure to save them. After a while, second brother Wu said, "Let's go. Be careful. There must be a lot of F***king traps here. We have to be careful. Otherwise, no one will benefit." The few of them walked through the tomb door one after another. With a loud bang, the tomb door fell. There was no way out. Chapter 729. It was not dark in the ancient tomb because there were luminous pearls embedded in the ceiling, emitting a faint light. The eyes of the grave robbers lit up, and they kept swallowing their saliva. There were so many luminous pearls. How much would they be worth if they dug them all out? However, no one dug because it was too high. The ceiling was about 5 meters high, and there were smooth stone walls on both sides. They could not climb up at all, and they could only sigh. Useless things. How much is this worth? The big part is inside. Wu Lao slapped the head of one of his men and scolded him. The man was slapped into the wall, making a crisp sound. The person walking at the front suddenly let out a scream, and he disappeared because he stepped on air and fell into the darkness. Watch your step. Wu Lao shouted. The crowd immediately jumped up and down because the stones under their feet were moving. Some stones disappeared into thin air, and they were caught off guard. Tang Zheng saw the stone under Professor Chi's feet disappear, and he quickly grabbed his hand. They jumped into the air and moved to another stone slab. However, that stone slab seemed to have lost its support and fell down. Tang Zheng skimmed the surface and pulled Professor Chi through the stone slabs. However, the other grave robbers were not so lucky. After a while, more than half of them fell down. The others gathered around Wu Lao, and they all looked as if they had lost their parents. Wu Lao's face was ashen. He looked at Tang Zheng and Professor Chi from afar with a surprised expression. Obviously, he also knew that he had misjudged them. However, the situation in front of him did not allow him to be distracted. He jumped up and down, and his toes moved quickly. He narrowly avoided stepping on air. The other grave robbers did not have his skills. They screamed and fell into the darkness. There was no chance of survival. Bang! Wu Lao's feet landed firmly on the ground. He looked back and saw that the 10-meter distance he was standing on had completely collapsed, leaving only a dark space. It was like a bloody mouth that swallowed people. It made him shudder. It was too late for regrets. He should not have slapped his subordinate just now. The other party must have hit the mechanism on the wall, causing the entire team to be wiped out. His intestines were about to turn green with regret. He took a few deep breaths to suppress the unwillingness and anger in his heart, but when he looked up and saw Tang Zheng's face, his anger surged again. Brat, so you were pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Tang Zheng smiled coldly and said, Are you a tiger? You think too highly of yourself. Wu Lao clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. He wished he could go up and beat Tang Zheng up. However, when he recalled Tang Zheng's elegant movements just now, he knew that Tang Zheng was much more powerful than him. He couldn't help but wonder if the other party's strength surpassed his. He didn't dare to cause any more trouble. This place was filled with danger. If he wasn't careful, he could be killed by the traps. It was better not to provoke the other party. Humph, good, as expected, the younger generation will surpass us in time. Wu Lao threw down these words, flicked his sleeves and left, rushing forward with large strides. Professor Chi said worriedly, Since you've already shed all pretense of cordiality, why don't you just directly capture him? Tang Zheng smiled mysteriously and said, This place is so dangerous. It's good to let him take a trip. Moreover, he doesn't even have any explosives. How can he run out of here? Professor Chi suddenly understood and laughed. Tang Zheng, why didn't I realize that you were so cunning before? Tang Zheng said with a bitter face, Didn't you teach me this? You can't be merciful to this kind of grave robber. Professor Chi nodded in agreement. Yes, you can't be merciful. I'll say something that shouldn't be said. It's better if all of these people die. Ha ha ha. Looking at his indignant appearance, Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. The two followed Wu Lao and the whole way was unobstructed. They didn't encounter any more traps. Obviously, both sides were very careful. They didn't act rashly and didn't trigger any traps. Suddenly, the sound of fighting in front of them attracted the three's attention. The three immediately stopped and looked up vigilantly. The road had already come to an end. In front of them was a huge space, like a vast hall. Why would a hall be described as vast? Because looking from afar, it really was boundless. The three simultaneously sucked in a breath of cold air. This ancient tomb was getting stranger and stranger. The sound of fighting meant that someone had already entered. Perhaps it was the people who used the explosives just now. Moreover, it wasn't just a group of people. Gunshots rang out like firecrackers. When Professor Chi heard this, he beat his chest and shouted, "What a sin! Who knows how many cultural relics have been destroyed inside? This is a crime against history, a crime against the Hua-Xia civilization." Tang Jing hurriedly grabbed him, afraid that he would rush in. Even he wouldn't be able to catch the rain of bullets. Wu Laoer's expression kept changing. He stretched his neck to look inside, but he couldn't see clearly. In the end, his face was ashen. Obviously, the people inside were definitely more powerful than him. It wouldn't be easy for him to gain any benefits. The gunshots gradually stopped. The winner must have been decided. Suddenly, the few people couldn't sit still. The winner had been decided, so it was time to divide the spoils. If they still didn't go in, then they wouldn't have a share. Professor Chi couldn't bear to see the tomb robbers destroy the cultural relics. He kept urging Tang Jing. Tang Jing also felt that they couldn't delay and rushed into the hall with Wu Laoer. Tang Jing kept Professor Chi firmly behind him, afraid that a bullet would suddenly fly over. If anything happened to Professor Chi, then he would be guilty. After entering the hall, their field of vision suddenly opened up. Many people had already fallen on the ground. They were struggling on the verge of death, but they were mercilessly shot to death by the enemy. When they saw the three uninvited guests, the group of people turned their guns and pointed at them. They shouted, "Who are you? Hey, isn't this Wu Laoer? You're really lucky. You actually didn't die. Oh, you even brought two helpers. That's too shabby. One old and one young. You don't have anyone, right? Haha." Some people in the crowd recognized Wu Laoer and began to ridicule him. Wu Laoer's face alternated between red and white. He said, "Chui San, don't be so damn arrogant." Shouldn't I be arrogant? Damn it, this ancient tomb was first discovered by me. If it wasn't for the news being leaked, how could you have a chance? But so what if you came? Everything here is still mine. Don't even think about fucking touching it. Chui San unscrupulously roared. Wu Laoer curled his lips and disdainfully said, "Chui San, you're too early to talk big. It's not like I don't know your ability. Your ability is not enough in front of me." Is that so? Then look at those dead people on the ground. Who's more capable than you? Chui San proudly pointed at the corpses on the ground. Second brother Wu's pupils suddenly constricted, and his mind was greatly shaken because he saw a few familiar faces among them. These people were all famous figures in the plundering world, and their strength was several levels higher than his. How could these strong people be killed by Chui San? This was not scientific, not normal. Wu Laoer's eyelids twitched and his expression changed greatly. Seeing this, Chui San wantonly laughed. "Now you know how powerful I am. Wu Laoer, today is the day you die. Go to hell and watch your grandpa Chui San, or live a good life for the rest of his life." Tang Zhang and Professor Chi were not in the mood to listen to his bragging. Instead, they observed the hall. The hall was really big. They couldn't see the end of it at a glance. It was like a huge space. This space was far more vast than the mountain. This was too strange. Even Tang Jing couldn't help but frown. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. This demon was too big. Looking up at the sky, the two were simultaneously shocked. Above their heads was a void. They couldn't see the end of it, but there were specks of stars in the void. It really did look like a sky. But how could there be a sky in this ancient tomb? Professor Chi could no longer explain all of this with his knowledge. This was definitely a huge discovery in the archaeological world. It would definitely shock the world. Compared to this, the pyramids were not even worth mentioning. The ancestors of Hua Xia were indeed endlessly creative and intelligent. Even modern people would find it difficult to achieve this. Professor Chi was secretly speechless. Tang Zhang looked into the distance. He couldn't see the space clearly, but his intuition told him that there was something inside. Professor Chi, let's go over there. Tang Zhang said. Professor Chi's eyes lit up, just what I wanted. The two ignored Cui San and Wu Laoer's hostility. They were about to leave when they immediately attracted Cui San's attention. Stop! Cui San flew into a rage. He waved his hand and a group of subordinates blocked the two's path. Wu Laoer, your two subordinates don't know the rules. We haven't even finished talking and they want to run. Wu Laoer meaningfully said, is that so? Then what are you going to do? What are we going to do? Of course we'll do the same as you. We'll send them to see the King of Hell. Cui San said with killing intent. He waved his hand and a group of people surrounded them. It was clear that in the eyes of this group of desperados, they didn't care about the two of them. Tang Jing wrinkled his eyebrows. This group of people were not good people, so he decided to take care of this matter. His feet slipped, and like a loach, he slid through the crowd. Every time the others touched his body, they would be sent flying and fall to the ground, bleeding profusely. Although Wu Laoer already knew that Tang Zhang's skills weren't ordinary, he didn't think that he would be this powerful. He was able to make a name for himself in this field mainly because of his master's small skills. The method to dissolve the yin qi was also a method that his ancestor had found with great difficulty. It wasn't that he was very powerful. Cui San was frightened by this scene. In the blink of an eye, he was the only one left standing. His face was ashen as he shouted, I'm going to kill you. He waved his hands in the air, and a scroll rose into the air and slowly unfurled. Tang Zhang's eyebrows wrinkled as he stared fixedly at this scene.